Yes, it's time for a review of Shogun. Ahoy! And welcome! I am Captain Garrett of the Swords and Starships channel. Let's talk some Shogun, shall we? Hi, how are you on a Wednesday? Did you catch the nooner? I caught the nooner earlier today, and I was very sad Chris Gore wasn't there. But we wish him a speedy recovery. Film Threat, one of my favorite channels on YouTube, so... Alright, well, we're going to do a review of Shogun episodes 8 and 9. This show so far, folks, is the best show of the year. And the captain is going to have some help today. And we're going to be bringing on our special guest in just a moment. But in the meantime, we are live on YouTube, Rumble, and X, formerly Twitter. Please like and subscribe. And fair warning, this will include spoilers. This will include spoilers, but we're going to kind of warm up to it, so there won't be, like, super spoilers right off the top. Mr. Producer, let's break down the music, and let's bring in our guest. A man, a myth, a legend. He is Redoubt Productions, a historian of great repute. How are you, sir?
Doing good. Just got off work. I had to take my computer into work today to work on a project, so that's what the delay was about, getting everything set back up here.
That's rough, man. But you're here, and that is what is important.
That is what is important. I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so it's so rare that we get something like Shogun. It's so rare that we get a show that's this good that I just felt like I wanted to talk about it this year. Just have some extra chat time. And also, Redoubt, you are a historian. You study history, as does the captain. And so, I just feel like this is the perfect show for you to help me review.
I will stress, I only claim to be a historian of the French and Indian War, which European viewers may know as the 7 Years' War. I am, however, a history buff of many different facets of our shared past. And I have dabbled occasionally into research of the feudal Japan era, particularly the era that Shogun is set in. So I do not profess to know, honestly, I don't profess to know much of anything about this period. I can't speak about it on an academic level, but I am passionate about it.
Yeah, I mean, neither do I. I feel like one of the kind of neglected historical studies, certainly in Western culture, is Eastern historical, Eastern history. Because, whenever I have learned about, fascinating things about like dynasties in China and just, different historical events on the History Channel, when there was a History Channel, I'm always blown away by how absolutely fascinating. Yeah, there was, and I totally forget which, it was so long ago that I saw this, but there was this one dynasty in China where the emperor had his advisor, his top, I guess you would say his top courtier or whatever. He was basically like an advisor, very high ranking, had built him this massive fleet that he was going to use to explore the seas and possibly colonize and all this stuff. And then that emperor died, and his successor had the fleet burned. And it's
God.
but for that event, we might have been talking about a totally different world history. And I just find things like I got to find the details on that because it's such a fascinating story. So I love getting the opportunity to see a historical period recreated. That's not typically in the realm that necessarily I've been exposed to. And I think feudal Japan...
There's very few off the top of my head in terms of Western media outlets trying to cover this period. The other time I can mention them trying to do it is the 1980s miniseries Shogun. Because remember, Last Samurai, that is actually late 19th century.
True, and it's also kind of it's a fantasy story. It's basically
yes,
a fun fantasy story. It's a rousing adventure. That's what I like about The Last Samurai. I think the title was a touch on the nose. It's a little bit.
It's like they heard of what The Last Mohicans were, but they don't understand what The Last Mohicans is about. Essentially what it feels like.
It is similar in many ways. I love The Last of the Mohicans, by the way. That's such a great film. But in any case, Shogun, so we are on episodes 8 to 9. And I actually have the companion guide on the website of Shogun pulled up here, so we can actually break this down
I
beat for
was actually
beat.
going through that during my lunch break today, just trying to remember a few things that have been happening. I'm like, oh, thank goodness for this website.
It is very intricate. Like every scene, there is just this intricate palace chess game that's going on. And I think that, it for viewers who've never read the novel or seen the original series, as I had not, I think going into this, based on the marketing, you're probably thinking you're going to get this like epic samurai battle story, and you're really not. What you're actually going to get is this incredibly intricate, delicate, high stakes Game of Thrones within the. I guess you would call it the shogunate. I'm not sure. Would this be the shogunate? In any case, within Japan, and of course you've got the Portuguese and the Spanish colonists in the mix. And they're really not colonists per se. They're mostly at this point just trying to trade with Japan, but they've established some churches and they're doing some conversion, that sort of thing. The thing I love the most about this show, though, is it is absolutely exquisite. Like its recreation of the period is exquisite. The lighting is amazing. It really, you feel like you're there. The landscapes, they show you things like the hot springs. Just the costumes are unbelievably good. Mariko wears this costume in the most recent episode, episode 9. And let me see if I can find the picture of this because it's freaking gorgeous. She is gorgeous, no doubt about it. Let's see. It was the episode Crimson Sky. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's right there. Yeah. Here it is. I'll share my screen. And it's just, she looks so epic in this. Here we go. Look at that.
Behold.
And she's wearing her cross, because she's showing off her Christianity in the scene where this is applicable. And it's a pretty amazing scene. It's amazing how much tension you can create with talented writing. It's amazing how much tension you can create with just conversations. Because one thing I always talk about on this channel is that you can tell the difference between really thin, boring characters and like really brilliant, interesting characters where you can have these sort of complex games of intrigue. And the difference is that they're just multi-layered and multifaceted. And this is a culture and a society in which almost everything they do on the surface is a misdirect for something that's really going on. And what's really going on is often like 2 levels deep. It's the misdirect. So she'll be talking to Ishido in this episode. She knows that everything she's saying is for show, and she knows that Ishido knows that everything she's saying is for show, and vice versa. Everything Ishido says is totally for show. And so automatically, everyone listening to their conversation and everyone participating in the conversation is actually disregarding, other than for the appearances of it, is disregarding what they're actually saying, and they're reading a layer deeper, which is she's issuing a threat, he's issuing a counter threat. But beneath that, they're trying to parse out what each other's motives are, because they both know that the second layer game isn't everything that meets the eye. So you cannot write characters like this if they are not incredibly complex and well drawn. And Song of Ice and Fire has that also. So I'm just impressed as all hell with this. So what are kind of some of your thoughts, Redoubt?
I can't comment more on the costuming other than what you've said. It's phenomenal. At the very least, this show's going to go down in the record books as one of the best costume designs that have ever been put on screen.
Yeah, the
whole
Jarvis,
sets, everything in terms of the material culture in this just looks phenomenal. Nothing looks out of place. Nothing looks like this should not be here, or what the heck material did they use there? Or, hey, look, I can see where FX used the budget cuts from. No, in terms of visuals, you're not going to find a show better crafted for this season.
One of the more fascinating things about this show is I had never realized how much earthquakes had shaped Japanese culture, architecture, ritual, beliefs about death and life and the meaning of life. That was a factor that in my kind of outsider's view of their culture I had never considered until I watched this show, because it's like if you live in a country where an earthquake can knock you down at almost any time anywhere, that that naturally shapes how you view life and death. It's so fascinating how they have this idea of, at least as the show presents it, that we live and we die. Beyond that, there's not much within our control. And so they have this ability to accept death and fate in a way that Westerners like John Blackthorne find abhorrent. And hello, ahoy, Anthony Tibbetts in the chat. And Stormcrow is here. Howdy, boys. Hello, Stormcrow. Welcome aboard. We're just talking just a little Shogun. Or as Lieutenant Jim Dangle would say.
Wait, what? I'm just goofing. New boot goofing. Oh, wait, what? I'm just goofing.
Just new Shogun goofing. Just new Shogun goofing.
Oh, God.
And Redoubt has left the stream.
Good night, everybody.
That's
it.
Did you ever watch Reno 911? Redoubt?
I've only seen the commercials.
Oh my God, it's so
I know
funny.
it exists.
It's so funny. But it's so dated because we don't really have, there's not such a thing as cops. Well, there is, but like it's more like YouTube channels now. But the show Cops, what used to be really popular, and it was always about like the cops walking up to, they'd always be narrating what they're doing and why. And Reno 911 just recreated that, except that it was a bunch of dipshit cops in Reno that are terrible at their jobs, and they're kind of in a hole in the wall department that nobody cares about. It's underfunded, and so they mostly just do stupid things, and they chase criminals that aren't interesting, or it's pretty funny. So that's Jim Dangle. That's the leader of the department. And
so Reno 911, they're investigating the pettiest of petty criminals.
Yeah, exactly. It's so anyway.
Look for the exit.
Yes, Redoubt looking for, yes, exactly, Anthony. Now,
it's always important to know about your fire escapes.
Let's jump into the first episode here of Edward, and again, there will be spoilers for Shogun. So I think we're going to go to, I watched, because the last time we convened, we had done episode 7. So we'll start with episode 8, The Abyss of Life.
And I would like to point out before we continue, me and the captain both agreed that episode 7 was the weakest of the series thus far. And we were really beginning to question the motivations behind Lord Toranaga, just like all of his vassals are beginning to question him severely. So we're all kind of living vicariously through his vassals like, dude, what are you doing?
This show is a really slow burn. But it's not a slow burn in that there's not things happening. The thing about the show is there's always stuff happening. There's always a game in every scene, right? And by game, I don't just mean like a game you play. I mean, there is literally something at stake in almost every scene, and there's some kind of power struggle, however miniaturized. There is some kind of power struggle in every scene, and every power struggle is building up towards something. So the show moves at a pace. Like it's not like Andor, where I'm watching it and there's 3 or 4 scenes in a row that I'm like, you could delete all 4 of those scenes. There's always something happening in the show. However, I think part of it is maybe just a Westerner mindset also, because I feel that this show is almost teaching me how to be more present, like a Japanese garden, I feel like I'm John Blackthorne. I'm restless. I'm like, right, yes, I understand. You have to have your court intrigue, but when is there going to be some battle, man?
I got a ship. We have cannon.
Yeah, exactly. Like, when do I get to shoot my cannon? That's
my lord, have
basically...
you heard of what Chekhov's gun is? Well, I'm going to revenge you and give you Blackthorne's cannon.
And it's as if this show is kind of patiently saying, don't walk on the moss, sit down, close your eyes and just experience it, you know? And sometimes that's a challenge for me. I get the feeling everything is building towards a really awesome conclusion, and there was some really good bloodshed in episode 9. There was a great action sequence I loved a lot involving Mariko, and we'll get into that. But I feel like that's kind of the thing, is like this show in a very real sense is it is patient, it is deliberate, everything is for a purpose. And if you're into that palace intrigue, you're going to have a ball with it. But if you're in it kind of looking for big battles and fast moving plots, it's not really going to hit that spot. And I feel like episode 7 was kind of a low ebb in terms of the pace.
The two things you need to know about episode 7 is that brain's coming to me. It's been a long day. That Toranaga's estranged brother, technically half brother, he came feigned alliance with Toranaga, but revealed, psych, I have been inducted as the next regent of the 5 regions. I'm joining Ishido's side, and you got a day to tell me if you're surrendering or if I'm killing you now. Are we going to kill you now or kill you later? And then the rest of the episode is basically a recap of all of the internal conflicts of all the different characters and Toranaga literally listening to it all. To which in the end, Toranaga decides he is going to surrender, upsetting all of his vassals because they're completely bewildered why he would just give up so easily. And his son, outraged, tries to assassinate Toranaga's half-brother. It did not go well for him.
Yeah, and that was Nagakato, Toranaga's son. Basically, he tried to turn the tables on the betrayal of Toranaga, and he slipped on a whetstone and cracked his skull and died. Which was,
and as we open with episode 8 to bring that up, we have I guess you want to say the Lord of Death here, Yabushige, contemplating where he would rank that death, like quite literally doing what us nerds do, like
he's building a death tier list.
He's like, I think what he says, he's like, did he say it was better than boiling water, boiling oil? He ranked it above one of the previous deaths we've seen.
I know I think he put it below being boiled alive.
Okay, it was before, but he put it above others. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, it's creative. I wasn't expecting that.
and this character here on the screen, this would be Yabushige, and he might be my favorite character. Quite honestly.
My favorite character.
He's so great. He's a kind of in Game of Thrones terms, he's a kind of Littlefinger character, or almost kind of like the spider, he's a guy that's always got an angle on everything. He's always open to options. He's always open to switching sides. And he's a really well-written character because there's so many scenes where he surprises you with moments of courage. I feel bad for the guy. I feel bad for Yabushige because I'm
like, look, I just want to I just want to oversee the fishing village. I just want to make sure everything's secure and safe. But yet he also keeps insisting he wants the most epic of deaths. So it's like, dude, you can't have both. You can't have the peaceful life and also have your dramatic death.
That's a great motive for a character.
You can't have both. He's just so bored with life. He's like, I want everything secure, but I'm going to try all these ridiculous ways to almost get myself killed.
All he wants is a kingdom and to back the winning side. That's all he wants. Yes. Just whichever side's the winner, I'm going with it. I'm fine. I'll be, whatever they need me to do, whatever they need me to be, I'll be that. I just want to, just leave me out of all. And the funny thing is that the winning side keeps changing all the time.
He's like, what am I going to
do? It's like 1 minute Toranaga's winning, next minute Ishido's winning. And then even when one side is winning, the other side is making him an offer he can't refuse. And to make it all worse, for some reason, both sides think that this man is the linchpin to their plan, which is the worst position for him to be in because he's always on the spot. That's actually, what he's kind of like? He's kind of like the character of Baltar in Battlestar Galactica, played by James Clavell. He's so much like that character because Baltar in that show, who is, I always say whichever character I think of in Battlestar is my favorite character, but I think Baltar might be my favorite character.
Well, Yabushige's that one guy that you're like, he is crazy enough to bonsai charge me.
Yeah, but what happens to him is what happens to Baltar. He always winds up in a situation where he's the football between two
Oh, yeah.
sides, which is the last place in the world a guy like him wants to be. And so he's always trying to worm his way out of it. And I think one of the things that frustrated me with episode 7 is I have what's called natural American pugnacity. And natural American pugnacity means I naturally don't like characters that are like, I'm going to surrender peacefully. And I'm like, what? No, you're not. You ain't surrendering. And so, yeah, I was very frustrated with that. And of course, you're waiting. You really cannot tell whether Toranaga means it or not, which is kind of brilliant. So this episode 8, basically starts with Toranaga has kind of gotten a lucky, he's gotten a benefit from the unfortunate death of his son, because the death of his son has given him it's bought him time, because he gets 45 days to mourn his son. And that's like custom, and there's no way for Ishido to get out of it. So his surrender has been delayed, and he gets to kind of use this time to strategize. But much to the dismay of his men, he is insisting that, no, we're surrendering, and that I just want peace. I don't want cities burning. I don't want people dying for causes. I just want this to end. And it's really his men are not happy with him. So in Ahsoka, Ishido celebrates Toranaga's surrender, and he proposes marriage to Ochiba, Lady Ochiba, who is she's kind of playing the Cersei role here. she's pouring poison in Ishido's ear and getting him to.
I like to call her.
What's that?
Psycho killer.
Oh yes.
She got the crazy eyes.
She's kind of crazy. She wants revenge on Toranaga and revenge on Mariko and all their clan. Nagakato's funeral procession moves through the city amidst unrest from the generals who still wish to fight. That's right, his generals, Toranaga's that is, insist on wearing their armor at the funeral procession, which is bad because they're supposed to be surrendering, so they're kind of defying that by wearing their armor and weapons anyway. They have this great funeral. I actually love this scene a lot. They have this great funeral.
It's great.
For why is his name escaping me? What was Toranaga's son's name? I forget. The
Sir who slips on rock.
Oh, it was right on the tip of my tongue.
It's
there
right
are
there.
a lot of characters. Nagakato. That's it. Yeah, Nagakato. So they're at Nagakato's funeral, and it's kind of a mixed bag because they're kind of jokingly remembering how brave and impetuous he was, but then they're also talking about how reckless he was. And then his friend says, he was reckless. That would be Omi, his best friend, who says, he was reckless, but give him some credit. At least he tried. At least he tried to fight. And this kind of gets pretty much everybody to sort of bow their heads quietly because they all agree that, yeah, the kid kind of ran stupidly, got himself killed, but on the other hand, he was trying. I thought that was a really impressive scene and like really powerful, and you could tell that it was moving Toranaga's men. What was kind of there's this great scene in which Buntaro does this intimate tea ceremony for Mariko, and that scene was really brilliant. The absolute meticulousness and beauty of the tea ceremony is amazing in this show, and it's one of the things I really love. I love how the period and the culture is so lovingly recreated, and I had this thought as I was watching the tea ceremony. I was like, every detail is kind of ritualized and planned. And I thought, we are losing this as a species. We are losing this ability to have rituals and cultural rites, beautiful artistic performances. We don't play our own music anymore because we can stream it. We don't go to theater because we can stream everything. We don't entertain each other as families because we all have phones. It's just it and our culture, which and I'm not knocking capitalism. I am a capitalist. Make no mistake. I believe.
Money.
But on the other hand, the kind of the lust for things that are new all the time, I think, has caused us to slip into a state of always needing novelty in our lives. And what's fascinating about, and I'm not just talking about Japanese culture, I'm talking about cultures around the world, including Western cultures. It's like we used to have, like the British, that would be you, Stalfia, right? The British still have a kind of low key obsession with having tea time. I think that's beautiful. And I'm like, we should have stuff like that. You know, you have the Spanish still maintain the tradition of the siesta, you know, the midday nap. You know, it's like little cultural things like that, I think, are important. And they beg us to slow down and pause and become present. And what I love about this culture, the tea ceremonies, the gardens, the kind of like the respect for moss, you know, just not walking on moss, just things
Fair
like
enough.
that.
Don't
The
walk 'em on.
meticulous nature, yeah, there's such a beauty and artistry in all of those things. I love it
I
every time a character is writing.
I have to bring something up because this happened to me this
Yeah,
week. Because those that may follow me on the Gilded for a Drink of Crazy, you may or may not know that I am in like college hell right now, trying to get through the last of my classes so I can get the nice funny paper that says, yes, you know what history is because you now got the funny paper. Even though I've been engrossed in research and history ever since I could read. I'm not even joking on that. I have to endure philosophy right now. Now, I think philosophy is highly important. In fact, I would argue this show is particularly about philosophy. It is always about different philosophical ideas and how every person decides to live their life by and how those different philosophies clash. But gosh darn, I can't do it in a classroom environment. This week's lesson was on modernity, on the wonders of modernity, and how all of these philosophers, particularly starting around the 18th century, they started to get into the Enlightenment period, which was about self-determination. But that has evolved over time into new wave, I guess, enlighteners coming up with the idea of you don't need rituals, that history and rituals and traditions, that's all meant to confine you, to confine the individual, which I'm sorry, I push back heavily on because, in my personal opinion, you have these traditions and these histories being involved with telling those stories and obtaining those traditions, that is kind of our lasting impact on Earth as humans. If we can pass these centuries old customs off to the next generation to keep it going and going, that's kind of our lasting imprint on the world to say that we were here hundreds of years later. Our name may not be remembered, but the thing that we were devoted to will still survive in some form. Now, it's also important to have a healthy dose of what word would I look for? Uh, Self-awareness. To also sometimes realize, okay, maybe I'm becoming too obsessed over something and I need to I need to calm down so it doesn't destroy what I'm trying to preserve. So I always feel I'm always one of them guys like you have the equal balance of everything. You have to be devoted to this, but also have a self-awareness that you may be going too far in some circumstances. But yeah, no, this week I've had to endure a lesson repeated over and over, like, tradition bad, history bad. No, to become an individual, you must break all of those down. You must break down the customs because they're what's binding you. God, I hate that philosophy. Look what happens when you destroy these traditions and these customs and things people respected for years. What do you end up with? Chaos. You end up with everybody imploding upon themselves.
cats and dogs living together,
Mass
total
hysteria.
panda. Yes, mass hysteria. I just saw a Dr. Steve Turley video where he was talking about Jordan Peterson. He was going on a typically brilliant philosophical rant, and like Turley kind of pointed out that there was he was quoting a theologian who had said something along the lines of the purpose of setting up like customs and mores and things like that in society is not to restrict and stifle people. It is to create a space for the good things in us to run wild. meaning to create a place where it is safe for play and creativity and beauty and love and all those things that are good in us, right? So in other words, the rules of the road are to kind of like say, let's keep out the evil so that we have a safe walled garden, so to speak, where we can play. And I thought that's a really interesting way to look at it. And I think that, one of the reasons I get so drawn to, I think we are as a society drawn toward fantasy. We're drawn towards sometimes futurism, like Dune. And I think we're also sometimes drawn to post-apocalyptic stories, often for the same reason. That I find historical stories so compelling, which is they all present a world in which we have, in some ways, slowed down, and we now live in a state of a kind of presence. In the case of fantasy, there's a kind of permanence, appearance of permanence to things, right? In the case of post-apocalyptic worlds, it's that all of the burden of all of our quest for things is gone now because everything's been destroyed, and now it's back to basics. It's so interesting, I think, to imagine that those pull the same strings in us. A historical, a fantasy, a post-apocalyptic, they're all pulling that string of, wouldn't it be nice if we could get back to basics? And I'm not advocating that situation of like a post-apocalyptic world, but I'm just saying I think there's a part of us that does want, that does yearn for being able to be present. And so this tea ceremony and the different rituals you see in the show are just so they're just so beautiful. They really pull me in. Stormcrow says, sir, consider the generation that's sucking in all the oxygen right now. Now consider how possible that is, meaning that we could slow down and pause. And, Crow, I don't have quite as dismal, or shall I say jaded a view as that. I sucking down the oxygen. Jeez, Crow. Come on, Crow. You can't be so pessimistic. What I would say is I think we're actually seeing something of a revival of traditionalism in society. I actually think that people are starting to become interested again in the old that does not wither. I think that is something that I do. Well, of course I watch Steve Turley. He's a scholar and a gentleman. He's I like that he's very positive, and that's why I watch him. I like that he's got a very positive, upbeat tone, which is something I always want to replicate as well. He's a white pill. So, but
he's taken the opposite of what Toranaga appears to have taken lately.
Yeah. So I think it's making a comeback, and sometimes I think we have to go through periods of unrest, and I think part of why I was watching Stranger Things again, and I'm looking at all the 80s nostalgia, and I just couldn't help but think about, trends used to last. It used to be measured in decades or centuries in human civilization. Now, but in the 20th century, trends were measured in half decades. It was like, a year goes by and fashion has changed. Technology, 5 years goes by, technology has changed. 10 years goes by, the world has changed. I mean, just look at the internet. So, I mean, the invention of the internet absolutely revolutionized all of human society. But then just within another 10 years, we had smartphones, which again revolutionized everything. So I just think that like some of the reason that we struggle to have traditions like this is because technology is just moving so quickly. It just moves so fast and it changes our culture so rapidly. And that's part of what I think is causing people to reach for that. So something more permanent, something lasting, shall we say. So in this episode, what would be the interesting thing to focus on? I think the most interesting thing in this episode is basically Toranaga he has released John Blackthorne from his service, and Blackthorne is kind of disappointed by this because he's like, well, the guy's decided to fight, and that sucks, and I'm pretty much with John Blackthorne on this. But he's got his freedom, so he's going to go get his men, get on his ship, and fight the Portuguese and the Spanish. Meanwhile, Toranaga is frustrated because his men are like wearing their armor to the funeral and they're kind of being defiant, and they all seem to think he's got a trick up his sleeve. So Toranaga, who's pretty sick, sits them down and he says, I'm going to need all of you to sign, to put your signature to this document that says you officially surrender and will be there with me surrendering, when we arrive in Osaka. And basically his men kind of, they disagree. They say, no, we don't want to do this. And of course, prior to this scene, there's a couple other things that happen. Is this the episode where Blackthorn finds his men? I'm trying to remember.
Yes, yeah, because they're in Edo right now. Because you have to remember, this whole episode, Toranaga sent Blackthorn's crew to like the very second episode. He says he sent him to Edo. By the way, Edo today is present-day Tokyo. So just kind of giving out the geography.
Oh, okay, that I did not know.
Yeah, this will eventually become the Tokyo you know today. Although it has to take over several forms. But in any, I'm double.
So John Blackthorn goes to Yabashige, this guy here, and he basically says, look, you and I both we don't really like each other too much, but I respect you, and I've seen that, you're a guy who makes his own fate, and so am I. And neither of us wants to surrender and go down, so why don't you let me sail for you? And I will, and we can just do our own thing. And of course, Yabashige clearly is interested. He's clearly very interested in this deal and very tempted.
His nephew's there trying to remind him, like, Uncle.
Yeah. His nephew's like, you're not considering this, are you? And Yabashige is almost on the point of saying deal. And then he looks over at his nephew. Because you're a foreigner, I will overlook this treasonous thing you've just said. And so but you can just tell he's like, I really want to say yes to this deal. And so
I also want to mention, we get this really gut-wrenching sequence where, Blackthorn kind of feels completely alien in the world. Because as the shows progress, you've seen Blackthorn gradually adopt more and more of Japanese culture, not just the obvious, now he's dressing in their ceremonial robes, but gradually he's been learning more and more Japanese. And by this time in the episode, he is able to be out in the street directly communicating with local merchants, which kind of throws off the gentleman's name of the Catholic Church. I forget his name, but it throws him.
Alvito?
Yeah, Alvito.
The priest?
Yeah. So we see this both a very obvious change, but also the gradual. And, well, Blackthorn really, really does not want to stay in Japan. He's like, look, I'm trying to adopt all this stuff just so I could survive, so I could get my crew and my ship and get out. Apparently there was a running gag behind the scenes right in the show where Cosmo Jarvis would remind everybody, like, I don't know if this fits to if they felt that Blackthorn's character was going off the rails, like, this is not hit to the core value of, I want my ship and I want my crew. He's like, we got to say that, like, we got to make sure that is our zeitgeist for Blackthorn. Well, he finally tracks down his crew. They've been kept in Edo this whole time. They don't really say where they've been kept. They're not really being held prisoner. They're being confined, basically, almost looks like the red light district of Edo or something. Yeah,
I think they said they put his men. So yeah, because I love this scene when Blackthorn finds his sailing crew, his sailors, and they have been holed up in basically the brothel district. It looks like they've sort of carved out a little area of the city where they're kind of allowed to live. And they have basically just been drinking and carousing nonstop for months.
Yeah. They're down to 6 men. One of his crew tells him, like, there's only 6 still surviving. They're all dying off.
Yeah. So he's got 6 guys left, and that's pretty much it. And Tom, is Tom in the Discord? I think I got a message. I let him know we're live.
Tom!
Jump in, Tom!
No, that you're a friend. No, you're a cat. You can't be on stream. No, disastrous things happen. Anyways.
Yes, the stream is not for cats. Cats are banned from the stream.
Try telling him. Anyways. But yeah, we ultimately have this moment where, there's a scuffle between him and his one crewmate. And not only does he just beat his crewmate into oblivion, he then throws his coat off and like throws his Japanese coat, just throws it down, like smacking on him, like how filthy, how disgusting he is, which is something very different from the black form we would have known at the start of the show.
Yeah, there's a really awesome moment. It's maybe one of my favorite moments of the series with Blackthorn. He's approaching the brothel where his 6 men are holed up, and he hears the sounds of their laughter. It's very it's very harsh laughter. It's the kind of laughter of rowdy drunks. It's not like a pleasant, we're all having a good time kind of laughter. And he's kind of approaching very slowly and hesitantly because he's just heard, one of the members of his house tell him, yeah, they've basically been, total assholes. They've been drunk assholes running around the town, and we'd be happy if they're gone. So yeah, take them. And you kind of see this look on Blackthorn's face, like he's almost afraid to see them. Then one of them comes stumbling out into the street, and he's chasing a prostitute, and he's kind of like handsy, and she's kind of trying to like get him off of her, and Blackthorn decides this was a bad idea, and he turns around to walk away. And oh yeah, Tom doesn't want spoilers. Okay, that's fair. That is very fair, Tom. So Blackthorn starts to walk away, and then his crewman spots him, and he's like, "Is that you, John?" And John turns around, and he's like, "Oh, yes." And so they have this little chat, and it is clear that his crew is not happy with him because they basically say that, "Oh, yeah, where the hell have you been?" And he says, "Well, it's taken some time, but I've got my ship." And they're like, "Why are you dressed in that skirt?" Because he's basically dressed like a samurai now. And I do love the line. Someone points out to John, like, "Are you really going to face your crew looking like that?" And he says, "Absolutely, I am." And I thought that was pretty badass. But then his crewman is basically saying, like, "You want us to sail? Where?" "Oh, why, we can sail home." He's like, "Really? And what happens if we decide to just not sail home and go off to Africa or the Americas, or we go on some kind of campaign? Where will you lead us, John?" And he kind of thinks about it. "Well, we're going home, we're done here." And he's like, "I don't believe you." He's like, "That you said something similar when we started this journey, and you basically ran us all around the world until most of the crew was dead. And look where you got us. We're all stuck here." And just basically reads him the riot act. And John tries to, "Well, that was our mission. We had our orders." And he's like, "Oh, we didn't have orders. Our orders were over. Like when we took that first Spanish base, it was you were obsessed." And then they come to blows, and Blackthorn winds up beating the crap out of him in the street. And then he's like, "All right, screw them." I just thought that was a really remarkable sequence because John has fundamentally changed as a man over the course of living in Japan. And this puts him in an interesting position because on the one hand, and he says this to Yabashige, he says, "I saw my men and I realized I really can't go back because something about them was rough and disgusting to me." He says, "But on the other hand, I don't really fit in your world either. So all I can do is try and make my own way the best I can." And I thought that was a really brilliant moment for his character, that he's not the man he was when he landed on the shores. He's actually learned a lot of Japanese, so he can kind of function pretty well in conversation now. He can't do super complex speech, but he's like good enough that he can communicate now on his own. He has sort of embraced at least some of their philosophical ideas. He's wearing their clothing. He's gotten used to that. He carries swords regularly and his gun. And it's fascinating to see him.
And he appreciates cleanliness.
He bathes now. He bathes. Like that's another big one. He's like, "Oh, I don't draw flies." He even says as he's approaching the brothel, he's like, "Oh God, the smell." He's like, "It smells like," what did he say? It was a charming British phrase, but I don't remember what it was now. You're right, Stormcrow. Tolkien did hate modernism. Yes, the old that is strong does not wither. So you're watching John Blackthorn. It is a fascinating idea that he can't go home again, but he doesn't really feel at home in Japan either. So that leads us to him going to Yabashige and saying, let's you and I work together. And Yabashige says no. And then that brings us to the scene in which they all come before Toranaga. And what they are looking to do is convince Toranaga to fight. And Toranaga basically says, or am I getting ahead of this episode? Because like, what's the end of this episode?
The ending, there is a sequence after the.
No, this is this episode.
Yeah. There's a sequence after the scene we're about to talk about. There is another sequence with Toranaga and Mariko, but we got to talk about these sequences.
Yeah. And again, spoilers for Shogun, because we're assuming you've seen the show if you're watching this, because we're doing kind of a deep dive on these live streams. So yeah, in the scene, Toranaga assembles his generals, demanding they pledge to die with him in Osaka. So this is where he says, I need your signature to prove you're willing to die with me. When some samurai begin to resist, Hiramatsu intercedes, and Hiramatsu is his best friend, his eldest advisor, this man on the left here. This is Hiramatsu, and dude, he is a great character. You know, when I first saw the trailers for this show, I thought it was George Takei because his voice sounds like George Takei, and also, I'm very grateful.
What is his? I know he has a relation to Buntaro, if I'm not mistaken.
He is
his father. Is he Buntaro's father?
Yes, I think he is. I think he's no. I think he's Buntaro's father, and Buntaro's on the right here.
Oh yeah, because I think isn't he also Fuji's grandfather as well, or something?
Yes.
I know they're all related. Yes. Which when you're dealing with all these vassals swearing allegiance to a particular lord, yes, they're eventually all gonna find they're related one way or another.
Yeah. So that's kind of who we're talking about now. When some samurai begin to resist, Hiramatsu intercedes, finally challenging his oldest friend. If Toranaga refuses to fight, Hiramatsu will commit seppuku. Shocking everyone, Toranaga does not waver. Now, this scene is really incredible because basically Toranaga's oldest friend, his oldest friend Hiramatsu, is basically saying, I don't believe you that you are just going to, surrender and give up like this. I think that you have a trick up your sleeve. You cannot seriously be the man who's going to ask us to sign our own surrender. And Toranaga says, I am. And by the way, Hiroyuki Sanada's performance as Toranaga in this scene is just so awesome. Because this is where he basically calls his oldest friend's bluff. Because I'm trying to remember how he phrased it. Hiramatsu says, I will commit seppuku unless you decide you're going to fight. If you don't, then you are going to watch your oldest friend die. And then Toranaga turns to him and just says, then die. Whoa. I mean, that is hardcore, man. And so, frickin', I know that Buntaro is his son because then Hiramatsu says to Buntaro, second me, which means that's who's going to cut your head off after you disembowel yourself. Dude, I cannot wrap my head around how men were able to do this. I cannot wrap my head around a culture that was so freaking badass that they literally could just at the drop of a hat, carve open their belly willingly. And it was like, okay, well, then I'll just do seppuku. I'm like, geez, that's the most painful way to like I've heard, being wounded in the gut is one of the most painful places you can be wounded. I do think the fact that you're about to be beheaded by your second takes the sting out of it because you're not going to have to live with that pain for long because they're going to behead you as soon as you stick the knife in yourself. So it's probably not quite as awful as it sounds, but Still, you watch this old man basically stick the knife right in his belly, and folks, it is blood curdling. It is so blood curdling, this scene. And Toranaga watches it, and then he watches his friend beheaded, and you see just tears in his eyes, which is, you might as well be weeping openly if you have any tears in your eyes in this culture as a man. Like, the fact that Toranaga has tears in his eyes in public is a big deal. And it's a pretty haunting and amazing moment. And then you get this final scene in the episode between Toranaga and Mariko, in which it's revealed that Toranaga does have a trick up his sleeve, and he's been playing an incredibly long game the entire time. He's been pretending to surrender, and the reason he was demanding his samurai to sign the surrender is because he needed them to be utterly convinced that he was serious. Like, in other words, nobody except Mariko knows that he has a trick up his sleeve, and that's by design.
Plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability.
Hey,
right.
I legit did not know he was going to do this stuff.
Yeah, but the catch is that he had no way of knowing that his best friend would threaten seppuku if he didn't admit the game. So he literally, even though his best friend Hiramatsu is begging him to fight, the reality is he is going to fight, but he has a trick up his sleeve and he can't tell anyone. And so here's his best friend saying, "Promise that you'll fight or I will kill myself." Now, he could have just broken character and said, okay, yes, we're going to fight. There is a plan. I'll tell you. And he would have saved his friend's life. But instead, he stays committed to the plan and he watches his friend die. And I'm like, dude, that's hellacious right there.
Friendly Miner, let's go back here, Mr. Toranaga. When you denied that you wanted to be Shogunate, oh, that's an ancient title. Sure.
Yeah, it's, hey, Rondo, good to see you. And yeah, that was truly epic. Like this final moment when he, in this episode 8, when he, and again, spoilers for anyone just joining us. We're assuming you've seen it. This reveal with Mariko that he did have a trick up his sleeve, but he's such a freaking man. He is so committed and he has such strength that he watched in kind of quiet horror as his own friend commit seppuku, not realizing that it was essentially for nothing. I mean, it's not for nothing because Toranaga's plan is to make his sacrifice worth it. But man, that is commitment. It kind of reminds me of that scene in Apocalypse Now when they find Kurtz, and Kurtz is sort of speaking admiringly of the Viet Cong and how the Viet Cong came across a village in which American soldiers were trying to win the hearts and minds of the locals. And so they had vaccinated them all against smallpox, which leaves a little lesion on your arm, right? And in order to make certain that nobody would collaborate with American soldiers, this guy cut off the arms of everyone, man, woman, and child. The Viet Cong leader cut off the arms of everyone in the village who had accepted the vaccine, which was basically everyone. And it was his own people he's doing this to. And Kurtz is kind of mad. He's out of his mind. And he's just saying, like, we think of that as an atrocity. But I look at that and I think, man, the strength it would take to do that. The commitment to your cause. And he's got this admiration for it. It's like, I can't help but think of, like, man, that is some serious commitment to your ruse, to your stratagem.
But friendly reminder, Colonel Kurtz had gotten completely off the rails at that point.
Yes, he had. I'm not morally endorsing.
But there are
Kurtz's
people
point
out there that when they read about, they read Heart of Darkness or they watch the movie Apocalypse Now, and we get to that character, everybody's always like, yeah, he has some good points. It's like, no, he's gone completely mad. I'm sorry.
Well, I think that I love it when villains make compelling points. I think the best villains always do. I think the best villains are weaving a lot of truth into their lies and their insanity or whatever it is, or their megalomania, whatever as the case may be. But I do think that it's a misreading of those characters as an audience member to sort of start like actually buying into what they're saying. For example, that great article talking about how sort of the younger prequel generation of Star Wars kind of started to actually believe what Palpatine was saying to Anakin in that scene in Revenge of the Sith, where he's saying, oh, the Jedi and the Sith are similar in almost every way, including their quest for power. And he draws this moral equivalency between the Sith and the Jedi, and that sort of became a meme where some fans were saying, yeah, the Jedi were corrupt and they were all about power and politics, and so they were just as bad. And it's like, but that's actually but they're missing the fact that this is an evil Sith Lord who will murder anyone and enslave anyone to get what he wants, and he's manipulating Anakin. He's lying to Anakin. So yeah, it's a misreading of a character like Kurtz to actually kind of, it just, in my opinion, believe what he's saying. Nevertheless, it doesn't change the fact that total commitment to your stratagem, and by the way, for any word nerds out there, the difference between the word strategy and stratagem is quite fascinating. A stratagem is a prepared ruse. It is essentially an elaborate trick that you are playing on someone. So it's not the same as a strategy, which is like a method of attaining victory. A stratagem is like a very specific ruse. And so Toranaga has this elaborate stratagem that requires him to watch his friend die for essentially no reason. It's freaking amazing. So that brings us to the close of episode 8. And I got to tell you, that was a banger episode. And then we got episode 9, which is pretty brilliant. So your thoughts, Redoubt?
Oh, I thought it was great. I'm a man when it comes to describing things, how good they are. I'm pretty brief on that. I'm like, it's great. I'm here to talk about it, so you know it's great.
Well, let's get Neutron Pack in here. Ahoy, Neutron Pack. Good to see you. Says, what I think is Hiramatsu makes a mistake earlier in the episode that he told everyone that no way Toranaga would surrender. Now, that's an interesting point there, Neutron Pack, because you're referring, of course, there's so many characters in this show that, I like to just remind everyone who we're talking about. So the old man here, Hiramatsu, is the man that commits seppuku. He was also the guy who reassured all of the vassals, all the lords, hey, don't worry, guys. I've known this man since he was a boy. I know that he's always got a trick up his sleeve. Don't worry. He's playing a long game. But literally, the long game is such a long game that even he starts to doubt it by the end of the episode, because he's literally looking at Toranaga making all of his men promise to not wear their armor at his son's funeral, to not put up any kind of fight whatsoever, to willingly be sheep to the slaughter, and he just can't take it anymore. And there's a heartbreaking tragedy in that, because Hiramatsu sort of created even more intensity in the men to defy Toranaga, because he kept reassuring them that this surrender isn't real. And so when he suddenly believed it was real, that just made everything worse, because now everyone's like, oh my God, Toranaga really is surrendering, and we can't abide that, And as Neutron Pack goes on to say, so to fix that mistake, he needed to die to prove to people in Osaka that Toranaga is serious on surrendering. Now, here's my question, Neutron Pack. Are you saying that you think that Hiramatsu knew that this was a trick that Toranaga was playing, and he literally killed himself to sell it? Or are you, because my contention is he did not know that Toranaga was playing a trick, and it was a mistake that he killed himself. It was a mistake because Toranaga was so committed to the stratagem that even to save his friend's life, he wouldn't tip his hand. And it resulted in the collateral damage of Hiramatsu killing himself. So my question, Neutron, is do you think that Hiramatsu was in on it or not? I think not, but it sounds like you're saying you think he was in on it. Either way, it's pretty fascinating. Neutron Pack says, I mean, he told his son no matter what to believe in Toranaga. Yeah. Well, he did do that. Absolutely. But what do you think, Redoubt? Do you think that do you think there's any hints in the episode that Hiramatsu knew that Toranaga was playing a game here, and he killed himself to sell the lie? So
the only thing I can fully think is at the very end of the episode, we see Toranaga go to the ashes of his son after they'd cremated him, and he thanks his son and Hiramatsu for their deaths as they have bought him valuable time. It's really the only full evidence I can think that shows, okay, maybe there's something more to Hiramatsu killing himself, but performing seppuku as part of the ruse. I can see the argument being made, but I ultimately think the reason Toranaga is so heartbroken is that, he's like, this is not what I wanted, but it's for the greater good.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue, I think it's pretty clear in the episode that Hiramatsu did. He really did believe right up until it was time to commit seppuku that Toranaga was playing a game and that he would admit it. Or that if he wasn't playing a game, that this would shake him out of his apathy that was leading him to surrender. And in both counts, he Toranaga called his bluff. He's like, all right, then kill yourself. And I would just say, if you think that this moment in the show was as riveting and absolutely brilliant as we do, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you hit a like. We are live on X, Rumble, and YouTube. And if you're on X, go ahead and hit that little heart. It couldn't hurt. It couldn't hurt. But yeah, so that was a brilliant ending to episode 8. And then we get the reveal. And by the way, this has been like 4 episodes in the making, because for 4 episodes, Toranaga has been playing everyone, including the audience. He's really been committed to the role of like, I am surrendering. Maybe 4. It's not quite 4 episodes, 2 or 3 episodes. And this episode at the end reveals between him and Mariko that this was all part of an elaborate plan by him. And then he says to Mariko, "Are you ready to do your part?" Which is our hook for the next episode. So let us get into episode 9, which is kind of it is a suitable penultimate episode because it is almost as epic as a finale episode, this one. And again, official spoiler warning if you're just joining us. And this scene in which she is she is gorgeous. She is just a gorgeous actress. And I love that she's wearing her crucifix on the outside for the first time in the show, because she's kind of displaying, it's kind of an act of defiance toward Lord Ishido. So we get the episode Crimson Sky. And we get more of a hint of Mariko's earlier days when, she has this history where basically her father had committed an act of treason, and she was one of the only members of her family that were spared, and that was because her husband Buntaro spared her life. And so her and Buntaro have had this strained relationship all their life. I don't know that I fully understand what she was saying in the tea ceremony, by the way, because her husband Buntaro prepares tea for her, and he kind of reminisces about when they were happy, and he says, "Hey, how about, since we're surrendering, you and I can just go into the afterlife together, in defiance of surrender, and you will finally have your wish. You'll finally get to die," basically, because that's what he thinks she's been asking for. She says, "You don't understand. I've never been asking for death. What I've been asking for is a life." What did she say? "A life free of you," I think. And boy, that was a blow. And you would expect him to lose his shit, but Buntaro's kind of a broken man at this point. And he kind of he weeps. He doesn't really say anything. So I'm not exactly sure kind of what the thrust of that was. Do you have a different reading on that, Redoubt? Why Mariko said that?
Buntaro's just a very broken man who's just misread every major situation.
Yeah. Well, so this is kind of what we get. At their wits' end, let's see here. Let's see. Forbidden from committing seppuku. No. Well, basically, the priest Alvido explains that he's been unable to win any support for Toranaga. We have Yabashige, Blackthorn, and Mariko arrive in Osaka. Oh, I do love this. Okay, I forgot to mention. In the last episode, Yabashige and John Blackthorn join forces, because after the seppuku of Hiramatsu, Yabashige is like, well, screw this. I'm definitely throwing in with John Blackthorn. And they form an alliance.
Which Toranaga makes an interesting comment about at the end of episode 8. God, we're still talking about episode 8. There's so much that happens in episode 8. And basically, he tells Mariko to I kind of suspect that Yabashige and Blackthorn were going to unite. He's like, yeah, got it. They're very predictable. They're so predictable, those two.
Yeah. Yabashige, man, he's always looking for an angle. I really sympathize with him, you know?
Because Toranaga's kind of like, let them do their thing. This will kind of work in our favor because this will get you in Osaka. Just let them do their thing. It ain't going to work.
Yeah, so basically Yabashige and Blackthorn are planning to ally with Ishido, which I don't think I quite understood that in the episode. As I'm reading this synopsis on the FX site, now that makes well, the thing about the show is I never assume that what someone is saying they're going to do is what they really intend.
No, I don't think it was more along the line because Yabashige continually pulls Blackthorn. So it's like, okay, you listen to everything I'm saying because I'm going to try to get you through this all. Basically, we're all going to claim that we're surrendering, we're done, but we're going to swear allegiance because I'm going to bring you the cannon and I'm going to offer the Taiko. I'm going to offer him the Anjin. It's going to be great, guys. And that'll be your ticket to get out of here, Blackthorn. That's kind of the whole deal. It's like, I'll be seen as a good guy because I'm bringing him the cannon. He's going to like you and it's going to allow you passage out of Japan. This is going to work.
Yeah, and that's an important point as well, because Yabashige or Ishido has demanded that the cannon, the ships, all of that be surrendered to him. And essentially, Yabashige is making a deal with Ishido to try and smooth things over. And he brings John Blackthorn along as a kind of gift. And he's angling for Blackthorn to have some kind of status, it looks like. There's a great scene where one of the regents speaks to Blackthorn in English.
Oh yeah, that was great.
That was really good. That was really good because he basically reads him the riot act in English, which was a nice turnaround. I really enjoy watching Blackthorn try and negotiate his way through this world. It's so fun to watch him learning how to survive in this literally cutthroat feudalistic society that he was once a stranger to, and now he's starting to kind of understand when to bow. There's like this great scene where they're training him how to bow properly. It's great fun to watch. So they Mariko, Blackthorn, I think a few other noble. I think it's basically just Mariko, Blackthorn, and Yabashige, and a few of their.
It's Yabashige's crew. It's mostly Yabashige's crew.
Yabashige's crew. Okay, right. So Yabashige's crew. They arrive at the castle, and there's an interesting little thing going on at the castle, which is all these nobles, anybody who's anybody in Osaka, is staying at the castle.
This has been building up since the very first episode, by the way.
Yeah. But there's a kind of unspoken thing about if you're staying at the castle, you can check in. It's like the Hotel California. You can check. You can what's the line? You can check out, but you can never really leave. That's kind of the real deal.
Well, but Captain, you just have to get a permit from Lord Ishido and all as well.
Right. So
the permits that we never seem to get.
Yeah, so the last episode hints that Toranaga has a secret mission for Mariko. She's the only other soul that appears to be in on Toranaga's stratagem. And yes, I'm going to abuse every opportunity possible to say the word stratagem. So, because it's hard to find the right context for it. So Mariko's plan is basically to expose the dirty little secret, which is that everybody who is a guest of this castle is really a prisoner and a hostage, and they can't leave on pain of death. So Ishido is throwing this wonderful little audience with all the nobles in attendance, and here comes Mariko, to give him honors and all that sort of thing. And she kind of throws a curveball at him because he says, I'm so looking forward to your poetry. I've heard that your poetry is so wonderful. And Lady Ochiba's like, yes, we will have wonderful poetry battles like we did when we were girls. And she says, oh, that sounds so nice, Mariko says, except that I'm not going to be here. And Ishida says, what do you mean? Surely you'll be staying here for the duration of Lord Toranaga's mourning, and then he'll be coming along as well to be judged and executed. Which he doesn't say that, but that's what he means. And she says, no. Toranaga has requested my presence at his castle, so I'm afraid I have to leave tomorrow. And Ishido says, oh, well, we really want you to stay, and we think it would be better for you to stay. And this is a great scene for Mariko because she finally just, it's gloves off, it's mask off. She just flat out tells him, if you will stop interrupting me, she has this great line, which is like, you might as well have thrown a bomb. She just says, if you would stop interrupting me rudely, I would explain to you that you have no authority here and then I'm going to leave. And obviously he's like on the point of saying, bring me her head, but he can't do that because that would be tipping his hand. So what Ishido says is, I really would rather you stay. And she says, well, I'm not going to, unless, of course, I'm a prisoner. And he says, no, of course not. Everyone in this castle is free to leave whenever they want. Great. So I'm going to leave. And he's like, great. And so she goes, but we all know, and this is what I mean by like everything they say on the surface, everyone in attendance knows that nobody means what they're actually saying, right? They're all playing a kind of Game of Thrones. And so what I like about it is that sorry, I'm distracted. Dog going nuts.
The Doge has seen a fly.
Yes, the dog is on about something. In any case, she where was I? Oh yeah. So the next morning, she's getting ready to leave, and her son. There's a really heartbreaking scene in which her son confronts her, and he says, "Listen, we all have to stay loyal to Toranaga, and it's really going to embarrass him if you or what? Actually, was it that her son wants to ally with the heir? I actually probably need to read this because I think that's who he wanted to ally with. Yeah."
Yeah, basically at this point, they're like, why are we still staying with Toranaga? He's all but surrendered. We're all going to perish. Why do you insist on going out in a blaze of glory? Don't you consider about me? Can't we at least support at least the heir? We can get back to that. Like, we'll spare some, save us from some disgrace.
Yeah, that's right. Because basically, so yeah, as in the synopsis here, they have it. In the aftermath of her dangerous proclamation, Yabashige and Blackthorn confront Mariko. Her secret plan has placed them all in danger. Her son, Ryuji, soon follows. Sent by Kiyama to defuse her act of defiance, he expresses his shame in being a part of her family. And then he says to her, like, if you insist on calling Ishido's bluff, I'm no longer your son. And she has this just haunted, wounded expression. I'm like, damn, that's cold. That is cold.
It is, but I also just love that sequence where almost like in a comedic way, after we've had the throne room scene, we hard cut to just Yabashige and Blackthorn both basically saying the same thing to him, like, you did what? What are we doing? And I think it's like Yabashige's going, no, Blackthorn, be quiet. And then proceeds to say the exact same thing that Blackthorn had already said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Those two are such a great odd couple. Yabashige and Blackthorn are so awesome together. So despite all protests, Mariko leads her party out of Osaka Castle, and this sequence is fantastic. This is one of my favorite sequences in the whole show. As the men approach the first gate, they are immediately stopped and surrounded by Ishido's samurai. Impossibly outnumbered, Mariko declares it her duty to obey Toranaga. Oh my god, you have to do this scene justice. So again, spoiler, but I love how this scene plays out, right? Mariko is approaching the gate, and there's a few of Ishido's men. She's got a few of her bodyguards next to her, and I love how, like, every line is like this carefully crafted, multi-layered, message with subtext and there's a kind of gamesmanship to everything. And so they say, Lady Mariko, you must have a permit to leave the castle. And she says, Lord Ishido said I'm not a prisoner here. And he says, oh, of course you're not. You simply need a permit. And she said, I am requested and required by my lord to leave now. I am not seeking a permit. If I defy my lord, then I'm in trouble, and I can't do that. It is my duty to not, to leave the castle. And they say, well, it is our duty to stop you. And she says, very well. I am sorry to hear, something better than that. But she just says essentially the equivalent of I'm sorry to hear that. She turns around, looks at one of the samurai and says, please kill him. And I was like, that is so boss. That is so rad. And the samurai and I love it because her bodyguard walks up to the guy and he bows to the man he's about to kill, and then holy shit, the next just he draws his blade before they can, and he kills them both with like 3 strokes. It's fantastic. It's super rad. I love shit like that. I wish there was more of that in this show, but also what makes it so much fun is that it's I love the mental chess game, right? The game of wits that they're playing all the time. And this sort of like it's a poker game. It's this high stakes poker game that they're playing with each other all the time. And it's so delightful to watch. So then
I also must mention, because basically all of our key players, at least those that are in Osaka at this time, are able to witness the scene because everybody wants to see how Ishido is going to react. The situation is the hostage situation is all subtext. It's never directly stated. It's all subtext. The fear of Ishido.
Exactly.
We don't want to upset Ishido, who has control over the other regions, because he's aligned himself with the mother of the heir. So that is the situation. Everything is just unspoken. Toranaga's strategy right now is, I am going to expose how our customs are being manipulated against us. That, our way of life has been completely corrupted by Lord Ishido and his way, and that this got to be stopped. I'm going to show how bad Ishido is without even having to fire a shot in battle. That is Toranaga's master plan. He sends Mariko in because Mariko, well, for lack of better words, she has a death wish, but Toranaga wants to make sure that if she's going to die, she's going to do it in the most customary of ways. We'll talk more about that in the fallout of the sequence. He's going to make sure that her death is not in vain just to kill herself, like out of spite. God, this show can get really dark. So that's the whole stage here. Everybody's out there. Of course, we got Blackthorn and Yabashige watching, but we also got the other 2 regions. Now, we have Ishido, who's basically the main region at this point. We got Toranaga's half-brother, who's come in and basically made Toranaga surrender. There were 2 Christian regions. One of them, we saw in an earlier episode, was killed by bandits that totally were not affiliated with Ishido, for defying him. There's 1 Christian region left, and there's also a gentleman, I forget his name. He has a very deformed face, so we don't normally actually see him.
He has leprosy. One of the regions has leprosy.
Okay. I wasn't certain on that, but okay.
Essentially what King Eris had in House of the Dragon. It's basically the same thing.
So those are the last 2 regions that aren't in Ishido's control. So everybody's watching. Everybody's watching to see how this is going to fold. And there is a brilliant scene later on where Lady Ochiba basically tells them, like, we're screwed. This is a no-win scenario. Toranaga's done it. Because no matter how we respond to this situation, we're screwed. We've are compromised.
Yeah. I love how that whole thing is staged, because they're kind of in this middle part where it's a gatehouse, essentially. You have the inner gate and the outer gate, right? And so this battle is taking place in that space. On the parapets all around the gatehouse is the regents, the nobles. John Blackthorn is up there, Yabashige, and they're all watching this. Also, there's archers on the walls, and they're firing warning shots and occasionally kill shots down into the gatehouse. And I love how nerve shredding it is for Blackthorn, because he's just like, he clearly is in love with Mariko, and he doesn't want her to die, and so she's walking forward and they're firing arrows, and he's like, no, Mariko, it's like on the edge of his seat. And a part of me's like, I really wish Blackthorn would just pull off some kind of caper and just get some shit done here. But this ain't that story. This is like a real life story where he's as much trapped in the web of this world as anyone else. And he really is as much at its mercy as anyone else. And so there's not a lot of maneuvering room. But that being said, that is brilliantly put, Redoubt, because that is what they're established. That is what Toranaga is doing. Rather than simply assault the castle and create this big bloody war, he's using careful, like, court maneuvers to demonstrate that everyone that's in this castle is a prisoner. and he's basically calling the bluff of Ishido. He's like, oh, if everyone's free to leave, what happens if someone tries? And this whole sequence is just really fun to watch because, first she kills a couple of the guards and she starts moving forward. More guards come in. She kills a few more. But then, her guys start to, they're at a disadvantage. They've got archers firing down on them. They start to get whittled down. Finally, it's really just her left. And she moves forward with, and I forget what that weapon is called. It's a staff with a blade on the end. What's that called? Do you know? Stormcrow, I missed this. You said if we had 13 divisions of those men, our troubles in the Middle East would be over very quickly. I'm of a mind that I don't consider those our troubles anymore. That's just mine, but that's a little off
The only
topic,
way I can describe the weapon is it's like a one-sided halberd. That's the only way I can describe it. That's not the technical term, but it's almost like a halberd.
Yeah, it's like a halberd. I know there is a name for it. I've heard it before. I just can't remember what it is. But in any case, there's a great sequence where she fights them hand to hand. She has no chance. She's a skilled fighter. She has no chance. She's completely outnumbered. She has no armor. There's no chance. She knows that, but she fights anyway. And when it's clear she can't succeed, she then declares, "We have no choice but to go back to her house, her attendants and everyone." And she says, "However, since I have failed in my duty to my lord, I have no choice but to commit seppuku at sunset." And this is a big disaster for Ishido because a noble lady is going to kill herself because she is claiming to be a prisoner, which will, reinforce the idea that she is a prisoner and therefore they all are. And so this puts Ishido in a bind because does he call her bluff? Or does he let her go? If he lets her go, it shows weakness, and he doesn't want that. On the other hand, if he calls her bluff and she kills herself, then he's just exposed himself. So what follows is a really amazing sequence of scenes that are very heartbreaking because you can tell that Mariko she does not want to die. Which is kind of unusual in this show. That's like, everybody's like, one wrong word, I'll commit ritual seppuku. It's like, no, I just said that the tea was a little hot. That's all I said. Oh, I've dishonored you. Seppuku. No, stop. It's like, that's basically every 10 minutes. Someone in this show's committing seppuku. And finally, we have a character who's like, I really don't want to do this. Man, she is tough as nails. By the way, this is how you write a badass babe. Like, this is in my view a seriously awesome tough woman in a show, because her toughness is not some ridiculous pantomime of a male stereotype. Her toughness is her strength of character, her commitment to what she believes in, her faith. She goes to confession with the priest before she's ready to meet her end. But also the fact, she is able to fight. She has capability of fighting. But that's not what makes her tough. What makes her tough is she's willing to literally face down death, face down being disowned by her son, face down all these things. She's willing to make a stand that no one else in this castle is willing to make, by the way. And that's a very important part. She's willing to if any one of these nobles attempted to call Ishido's bluff, then his bluff would have been called. If any one of them had made any attempt to actually prove that they were not prisoners, they would have quickly found out that they were, but none of them did. They were all sheep, and they're all just doing what they're told. And they're all sort of deluding themselves into believing that they're not prisoners, even though deep down they know that they are. So here is this woman who has every reason to live, and yet she is going to go to her death. And so I tremendously admire this character. I love this character quite a bit. And there's a great scene when Blackthorn begs her not to die. And he says, I don't want you to do this. You have so much to live for, and makes this case. And one thing I really admire this show for is that I feel that it presents a very balanced view of both Western and Eastern culture, both specifically English, Portuguese, Spanish culture juxtaposed with Japanese culture of the time. And what I like about it is it's neither it paints neither a rosy, romantic, overly romantic picture of either culture, neither does it smear either culture in one way or the other. It just presents these cultures running up against each other. And one of the things I really love about it is this philosophical debate between the cultures represented through Mariko and John Blackthorne, which is John Blackthorne is arguing the typically sort of Christian case, I would argue, the Judeo-Christian case of life is sacred, your life is not something to be thrown away, suicide is a mortal sin, that whole thing. On the other hand, she's arguing the Japanese perspective of life is fragile, believing we can control everything is a fool's errand and is a fallacy that just leads to suffering. And in life, it's more important. It's more important how we lived than when we die. And both arguments are extremely compelling, and both have a lot to say. And as I often say on the channel, good drama is when two people are arguing and both are right. And this show is filled with that. And that's one of the things I love about it. But she ultimately says, no, there's no way I'm going to go back on this. And he says, all right, fine. You won't live for yourself. You won't live for your son. Would you consider living for me? And you could see on her face, there's a lot of temptation there, but she turns away and she walks away. And I just thought that was such a brilliant scene. And it encapsulates so much of the philosophy of the show, which I really do enjoy. There's two things in this show you're going to absolutely love this show for. Deep philosophical conversations and discussions and debates. And then also, palace intrigue and the game of power. The game of nobility, trying to consolidate power is really interesting. Anything you'd like to add, Redoubt? I kind of went on a long one there.
No, not particularly. We're heading into the final third of episode 9. So as the day progresses, we do get one additional scene involving Lady Ochiba. I keep saying it wrong, but it's Ochiba. So, Oshiba.
Ochiba? I think they say Ochiba, if I hear correctly.
So we have a sequence where Blackthorne's a little perplexed that he's been called before the air. So he's like, okay, him and Yabashika are both looking at each other like, okay, what's going on here? So he goes, and it turns out really it's just a nice way for Lady Ochiba to kind of, or Chibe, why would I keep saying Ochibe, Lady Ochibe, to cover up so she can have one final confrontation with Mariko before Mariko.
I think it is Ochiba. Yeah, I think I have it right here. Yeah, Ochiba.
Yeah, Ochiba.
So you had it. I think you had it right.
Yeah, so that's what truly is happening, and Blackthorne has to stand there awkwardly and endure these two going at it.
Oh yeah, that's a fun scene because so Ochiba's play is she wants to talk Mariko off the ledge, and because that will avoid the whole political mess, the damned if you do, damned if you don't pickle that Ishido is in. She's like, okay, if I can just talk Mariko out of it, that'll solve it. But she's having none of it, and they kind of have this confrontation over their past, and which is a pretty great scene as well. And let me know if you have any other thoughts on that scene. But the actual build up to her moment of committing seppuku is really it's a really impressive, haunting sequence. I love how this was shot, and I love the juxtaposition. I love the imagery, the mise en scène of the sunset as a backdrop to this scene. Like, this show has such an eye for natural beauty, which is something I love about this show. There's always like the sound of the rain, the wooden buildings, or the just the moss on the stones, the Japanese, the rock gardens. I love how this show luxuriates in all of that imagery. So, did you have another point on the previous scene, or should we?
No, I just wanted to break it up briefly. Essentially, what Mariko reminds is that these are your games. At any point, Achiba, if you want to stop these games, this is your game to end.
Yeah, that is a great. Was it Mariko who says that or John who said that?
There's multiple people who have reminded her throughout the show about it.
Yeah,
especially for this episode.
She's a schemer who's creating all this because, as Toranaga
this is
puts
the nightmare you created.
Yeah, because someone tries to persuade Toranaga earlier in, I think it was maybe episode 8. Yeah, I think it's the priest Alvito tries to persuade
Vito
Toranaga.
Just like, hey, you realize that really she's the one that's kind of controlling this whole mess, and if you can just convince her to be your ally, that you're not a threat to her, then this will all Ishido lose power. Though Toranaga makes a fair point, like you don't understand. Ichiba is the mastermind. You're correct. Is the mastermind behind all this, but she will not come to side with me. She is too scared of me.
And because, as Toranaga puts it, like how did he word that? But he basically says like her most governing thing is fear.
Yes.
Is fear. And so if anyone exists who she can consider a threat, she will never be satisfied. And Toranaga, there's no scenario in which Toranaga is not a threat to her in her mind. And so that's how they know that, like, yeah, there's no scenario where Uchiba's going to ally with Toranaga. So that brings us to, oh yeah, I forgot about that. As tensions rise, Yabushige receives a cryptic message from Ishido. His offer of loyalty has been accepted.
More on that later.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that later. All right. Where was? Let's see. Yeah, because Mariko does her confession. Yeah. So I think we're at the spot where we need to be. So it's sunset and it's the moment of truth. Do we have a picture for this?
I don't think, which is a real frustrating thing because it's freaking awesome. I guess
it is a great moment. Yeah, there's Ishido. Crimson Sky.
I don't think you're gonna find an image.
I'll just put that up there
that'll work
while we're talking about it. So it's sunset, and Mariko is preparing for her seppuku, and it's really haunting, the build up to this scene, because they're laying out this white sheet, and you're just picturing the blood spilling on it, and like her house is getting ready, and she's kneeling down, and there's the moment of truth sort of arrives, and John Blackthorne is kind of watching from the shadows. He's kind of watching from around a corner, and she said, and everyone's been trying to talk her out of it, of course. Nobody wants her to go through with it. And she calls for one of her vassals to second her. She says, "Come second me." That's the killer stroke. That's the beheading stroke. And you need that, or you're just going to be sitting there disemboweled in it for a while. And that's going to really suck. You're going to have a bad time. So he refuses. He refuses to second her. He just sits there because he can't bring himself to do it. By the way, me as a viewer, I'm like, please don't do this, Mariko. I'm like, I really don't want to see this happen. And yeah. I really was, and I'm totally sold at this point in the show that it's going to happen. I'm going to watch it happen, and I really don't want to watch it happen. John Blackthorne, who has been begging her to live, who's been constantly the voice of, like, I can't stand your culture's obsession with death. I can't stand how willing to die you all are. I can't stand this madness anymore. He says to her, I will do it. And John Blackthorne steps out and draws a sword, and you can see the look on her face, like, as if it needs to be said, excellent performances all around in this show. I mean, this is an absolutely stellar cast. It's absolutely unbelievable.
But let's just pretend for a moment that in character, we're in the universe. You tell me that Blackthorne ain't running for his mind. Oh yeah, remember that time Tornaga's couldn't kill that one guy, couldn't second him. It took him 9 times to behead him. The blood was everywhere. I've never used a sword in combat before. Really, Blackthorne, what are you thinking? It's a twisted kind act, but also, I made it worse.
I know, like if that
That
happens,
kept
no,
that
that would
kept
be very
playing in my
bad.
mind. I couldn't help it. I'm like, oh no.
Actually, let's talk about that. But first, Fu Man Blue with a $5 super sticker. Well, thank you, Fu Man Blue. I appreciate it. And it even says on the super sticker, keep it up with a little emoji. Thanks, Fu Man Blue. I appreciate it. Thanks for the super sticker. Hail the panel, says Fu Man Blue. Yes, and again, we are with Redoubt Productions. The link to his channel is in the description. Hail to the chat, ahoy! Captain salute to the chat. And like and subscribe if you're enjoying. If you're on Twitter, make sure to hit that heart button. It helps the channel, helps us do more of this stuff. So yeah, what I would say about John Blackthorne volunteering to help her, as a reader, a viewer, and as a writer, this is one of my favorite experiences in almost any story, is when a character who's gone on like just really dramatic journey does something as a result of that change that kind of surprises you, but also has just this enormous emotional weight to it. And this is one of those moments because nobody in the world wants Mariko to live more than John Blackthorne. And to boot, he doesn't approve of this ritual or their custom either. But the reason he's volunteering to help her is because he can't, she needs help, and he cares about her, and he knows her mind is made up, and he would rather assist her in making this as smooth as possible than allow her to sort of be abandoned in this moment, because that's how much he cares about her. As much as he doesn't want her to die, he cares about her enough that he's willing to put that aside and do this task that she needs. And so it's an incredibly powerful moment. It's awesome for his character, and the look on her face is, she's shocked. She can't believe it, but she's also got this look of kind of, it's really amazing, kind of a combination of like fear, gratitude, emotional overwhelm, the whole thing. And she says something to him in that moment too. She says, don't swing the sword until my head bows. What did she say? She gives him a line of instruction. Do you remember what that was, Redoubt? Are you frozen? Oh, I think you're muted. In any case, oh, you're shaking your head. All right, cool. It's something like don't swing the sword until my head bows or something. Anyway, the point is it's like this note of instruction, and you can tell that there's this real nervousness in her voice about it. And it's heartbreaking, it's painful, from a suspense perspective. I think the thing that most impressed me about her performance is how clearly you can see that, like, she does not want this. Like, she does not want to die, and she's actually kind of afraid to die. Not afraid to die, but, like, she wants to live. And I thought that was that shown the growth of her character over the course of the show. But the moment comes, and she's about to plunge in the blade, and then right then, you hear the voice of Ashido bursting in, and he stops her, and he throws a note at her feet, and he says, "There's your permit. You're free to leave." Jeez, I can't have, he says something along the lines of like, I can't stand all this drama, and he goes walking out.
That's basically how he treats it too. He's
just like, I'm sick of all this.
All these queens,
all these precious noble women and all their drama. Jeez, here's your permit. Gosh. And there's just, this look of like relief on everyone's faces. John Blackthorne looks like he's gonna faint. She's like, she's like sweating, and it's a pretty amazing moment. And she's got her permit. So he has yielded. So he has yielded and called her bluff, and revealed that, oh, I guess nobody's actually a prisoner. And she says he says she can leave in the morning. Okay. So she got her victory. And that results in a pretty beautiful moment that I think maybe I'm just more of a hopeless romantic, but I was sort of waiting for this for a while. I actually have a screenshot even. It just it's not very bright screenshot, but it will do. Yeah, present.
The high art of StreamYards.
Yeah, I really am. One day I'm going to have a better solution.
There's
than
really good
StreamYards,
things about
but-
StreamYards, and there's really bad things about StreamYards.
But yeah, but then we get a smoochy scene. We get a smoochy scene because because John Blackthorne kind of sneaks into her room that night, and she's pretty happy to see him. And it's a really earned moment too, because like that's the thing about action, romance, drama. You know, the difference between good storytelling and bad storytelling is always what is earned and what isn't. And what I love about this scene is it's very cathartic because he was prepared to watch her die. He was prepared to assist her in her death. She was all resolved. She basically knew right up until that moment that Ishido barges in that this is the end, and she was ready. And yet somehow they both find each other with a second lease on life and a second, you know, it's just a moment of, it's maybe the sweetest day of their lives because she got a reprieve. And so we have a smoochy scene in which they make love. It's very beautiful.
Now, for those that are wondering, wait, after all of that hype, Ishido caves so easily. Well, he's still plotting.
Oh, yes. Leave it to Ishido. So, yeah, I thought that was a really beautiful moment with those characters. And I'm getting the feeling that John Blackthorne... I had this thought, too, when I was thinking. I was like, what's the long-term potential here? Because, like, if he marries her and stays in Japan, you know, he'll always be a pariah. He'll always be stuck in this Game of Thrones with them. He'll always be the barbarian. Their children are going to be half-breeds that are sort of looked down upon. On the other hand, if he brings her to England, it's going to be just as bad. That, you know, they're going to be pariahs there. And I just thought, like, this would be an extremely difficult time for these two cultures to intermarry, and like that's going to be a hard road for them.
But don't worry, you ask Yabushige and he'll solve your matter.
That's right, because after this wonderful, touching moment, which, as we all know, in a proper Game of Thrones, it's never quite, you know, these moments, savor them while they last. Because then we see Yabushige up on the wall, and he seems to be pretty happy, you know, with everything. And he's drinking some sake, and one of his men comes up to relieve him, and he's like, "Oh, here, have a drink of sake too. We're celebrating." And the guy's like, "Oh, I don't know." He's like, "Oh, I insist. Have a drink." And they're you know, chatting, doing a little bullshitting. And then right as his buddy is taking a sip of the sake, he stabs him, kills him in a typically brutal fashion.
First you have to understand what is the sake. He played the age-old trick of, hey, what's over there?
Oh, yes. Oh, what is that? You know, and that was the end of that. And then Yabushige shot, you know, to our shock as the viewers, well, maybe not, because he's Yabushige. He's always working an angle. He basically assassinates a bunch of guards in a pretty fantastic sequence, I have to admit, and lets a bunch of, dare I say, ninjas into the palace. I don't know if technically they are ninjas, but they're assassins either way.
Yeah.
They're sort of dressed like ninjas.
They call them the shinobi. They're
the shinobi. Yeah,
they're
it's probably a very Western thing to just assume they're ninjas. I'm like, oh, ninjas! They're like, oh, no, that's a different thing. Fine. Can we just call them ninjas? It would make me happy, but we can't. Anyway, so they show up in the castle, and they proceed to start murdering everyone. And I have to admit, I really love John Blackthorne in this scene because him and Mariko get up, and they're sort of fighting off the assassins, and he just starts blasting with his pistol, and it's like, man, pistols back then were like a kind of mini shotgun, man. They did some damage. And he reloads his pistol, and he gets another shot off here, another shot off there. It's pretty fantastic. Fu Man Blue, Ninja's so racist. You know, I know. I'm just I'm a raging. You know, I'm just stereotyping their whole culture. I was educated by Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You can't blame me for that. That that was a reasonable education in Japanese culture. You know, I certainly know how turtles live in their society.
Turtle.
I love turtles. I love turtles.
Turtle.
Where was I? Baller, badass, awesome scene where John Blackthorne is just blasting the assassins with his pistol, and it's fantastic. I love seeing some good old fashioned 17th century gunplay. I will say the speed with which he was reloading that pistol.
Oh, I call bull.
It was a bit like an Assassin's Creed game, you know, where it's like it's like you just button mash it and he reloads the pistol like, and he's ready to go. I'm like, yeah, that was kind of a video game speed reload for me. I don't think you could reload the pistol as fast as he was.
I'm sorry, Blackthorne does not give me the impression he's the most skilled with firearms. He's a pilot. I'm not saying he doesn't know. Obviously,
he's
he has
a sailor
for protection. Yeah, but
he's a Navy sailor of the time. Like he would know pistols and swords. He would know those. Now he doesn't know what the hell he's doing with a samurai sword, but he should be trained in at least small swords, I would think. They don't establish in the show whether he's very good with a sword or not. He doesn't really stand any chance for the most part against a really skilled samurai, so they make that pretty clear in the show. But I do think he would be proficient with a pistol.
He started blasting, and that's what's important. He started blasting.
No, but I want to pause on this for a second, Redoubt, because we definitely have to talk about this, because he will, maybe you could argue that it was like some time jumps or something, but he blasts a guy with that pistol, and literally within like 10 seconds, he's got it reloaded. And it's like, you've got to put in the wadding, then you've got to put in the charge, then you got to put down the ball, then you got to put more wadding in there. If I remember correctly, a fast marksman of that era could probably reload a pistol or a musket. What would you say? Less than a minute, definitely. I think like trained British regulars could do it in.
By the 18th century, it's 3 rounds a minute. That's the standard.
3 rounds a minute.
But that's the 18th century. That's
what now is that?
Flintlocks, proper flintlocks. Now he does technically, and this is a thing that stretches this time period a little bit. I think that pistol is a flintlock. It should more likely be a wheel lock. It shouldn't. I don't think it should be a flintlock.
In 1600?
They exist, but it looks more like an 18th century pistol.
Now we'll just do a quick Google Hail Mary. Most common pistol in 1600. What would be the most common pistol? The flintlock pistol was the greatest advance in pirating since the wooden legs, says one of the first. What is this? I don't even know what that may not even be anything historical. I don't know. Well, that would be interesting to dig into. In fact, I think this site probably
I'm not
does
saying
actually
they couldn't have it, but here's the thing you have to consider. He was on a a seemingly Dutch merchant ship. Yes, he had ulterior motives. I think that's pretty obvious why Blackthorne was there. He had some ulterior motives, but the actual crew and ship he was working with, they had cannons to protect themselves, but I don't think they had the top tier of the European military. I'm just going to say that.
Well, maybe not, but they were. I think it's pretty well established in the early episodes that they're a fighting crew because they have letters of marque from the Queen.
This is true. I forgot about that detail.
Their mission was to, sink, burn, or take for a prize any Portuguese or Spanish vessels. They had full authorization, and they did, to assault forts and burn and put forts to the torch. So clearly they were fighting men. So I think that's fair. And a sailor would be proficient with loading a weapon. So now if you say 3 rounds per minute, is that one soldier or is that like, a rank of soldiers that we're talking about? Like as in the group of soldiers could get 3 rounds off a minute. Or are you saying like one soldier could do that?
I'm talking what you're drilled. If you have to go into volley fire, you should roughly be 3 shots a minute. That's That's standard by the 18th century, mid 18th century. But I'm coming from the time period I talk about.
Foodman Blue saying 20 seconds to reload. Now, if we're talking Civil War era, in the Civil War, there were like advances that made that faster because they had cartridges.
Percussion caps by then.
But they also had like pre-made cartridges that were, and
actually they did in the 18th century. That this British Army standard was cartridges.
But I think they were more industrialized in their production in the Civil War. Like they were like manufactured cartridge. You know, all you had to do is like tear off the thing and pour in the powder. It was pre-measured. But they would have done that also in like the 18th and I would assume the 17th century, where, you know, soldiers would have pre-measured amounts of powder in a cartridge ready to go. So I suppose you could make a case that Blackthorn really could reload that pistol quickly. Well, you know, like within seconds.
We're going to take it from the almighty source of Wikipedia, because I don't have time to go more detail. And it says that the flintlock mechanism, as known today as the true flintlock, was developed in France in early 17th century. So it could exist, but I would treat a lot of the tech they should have, at least on that ship, being more late 16th century, considering the time, because we're in 1600 exactly. That's like, we're on the cusp of that. So that's something. So I can stretch my belief. It's like, okay, and it's, you know, this letter of mark, hey, you know, these are some individuals, maybe they had some extra moolah and they were able to get some very high-end stuff. I'm willing to stretch it, but the pistol to me just feels it's a little too early to be in the show. That's just me personally. I'm not going to deny it's still awesome to watch.
Yeah. Well, and that, be that as it may, I think we've established he probably could load it faster than you would think. I just remember watching it and thinking, damn it, that seems like a video game speed reload to me. But actually, now you say, you know, 3 rounds a minute, assuming he knew what he was doing. And look, he may not know what the hell he's doing with a sword. He definitely knows what he's doing with a cannon and a gun, because he knows naval tactics. And back then, even if you were the captain of a ship, you were expected to be proficient with your sword, your dirk, and your weapons, your guns. So he would have had all of that. So, all right, cool. Well, that brings us to pretty much the close of the episode. And would you like to tell us what happens next, Redoubt?
Yes. So, as a reminder, if you maybe look at this, like, why is Yabashika turned on everybody and allowed all these ninjas in? Come on, I want to say too, all these ninjas in. The reason is Ishido has, after all of these episodes of Yabashige playing both sides, that comes back to bite him, because Ishido decides now, guess what? You can be on my side. I will grant you a pardon for all the treason you committed. And Yabashige's like, you are? Wait, really? This is actually going through after all this time? Yes, you just got to do one thing for me. And that's what you're seeing now unfold. Because Ishido is going to still try to take out Mariko as in any way possible, especially in a seemingly shady way, so he can try to play plausible deniability. Although, to be fair, I really don't think Ishido can salvage himself from this situation. Like, it's going to be pretty obvious pretty quickly. Like, oh no, these bandits, they were now able to get into Osaka. Oh no, who could have fought? Like, that just seems to me that the populace would go, really? After we already had one region, we already had one of the regions get murdered by these bandits earlier in the series. I think most people are going to catch on like, yeah, we're going to Tornaga. You're a dictator. So
yeah. I was kind of hoping that like at some point that Yabashige and John Blackthorn would team up and just start tearing it up together. I kind of thought that would be fun. Nothing ever goes the way you think it's going to go in this show. I will say that. Like, nothing ever goes the way you think it's going to go. It's always going in one direction. It goes in a totally other direction. Part of that is the fun of the show. And I think that's why I say it's a slow burn in that, even though the pacing moves very quickly in the show, it often defies your expectations of like what you think should happen or is going to happen. I'm hoping that like this finale is just going to be just blow the doors off. Like, I really hope it's going to be just crazy, just shit hitting the fan. What do you think, Redoubt? You think it's going to like go, what do you think is going to happen? Wait, you've seen the original, so never mind. I can't ask you that.
Yeah, because I gotta say, I did mention to Captain Garrett, there's a lot more that I can't confirm or deny is being brought over from the original novel or being added for the sake of the show. Many more characters in the miniseries gives us. The 2014 miniseries is twice the length of the original 1980 version with Richard Chamberlain, which I still highly recommend checking out because Richard Chamberlain and Toshihiro Mifune are phenomenal in their portrayals of Blackthorn and Toranaga, respectively. But yeah, this is where we're starting to get back to the end game where everything's starting to line back up to me. We're kind of doing a lot of roads like, I don't remember this happen. I'm a little confused. Oh, no, I remember this part. So I have to admit, I kind of knew about Yabushige's treachery. I kind of knew this was coming a long way. So I'm just kind of sitting there like, he's my favorite character, but I know where this is going. I know where this leads. But yeah, so they try to fight off the shinobi, but they end up deciding to go into this storehouse because has these strong doors won't be able to be cut through by any of their swords. So they all fall back in there. Yabashige goes in with them because he's trying to feign, I don't know what's happening type deal. And well, then the shinobis decide, well, if we can't cut through, we'll just blast our way through the door. So this leads to probably the most heartbreaking part of the show, both of the book, the show, if you know the story. Mariko decides that she's going to barricade herself against the door to try to soften the blast and thereby sacrifice herself to save Blackthorn and the rest of the people inside the storehouse. And that's where we end this episode.
Including Yabashige the rat.
Yeah. But he's our rat. He's our rat.
Yeah, he's got to die though. He's gonna have to die.
Don't worry, all in due time.
So after all of that, after this this nerve shredding build up to Mariko's suicide, and then the sort of wonderful moment of where her and John kind of get together and sort of celebrate that she's alive. The next thing that happens is she sacrifices her life, and it is blown up in the end of the episode, and it sucks. It really sucks because, I was really rooting. I was rooting for, once again, this is a woman deciding that there's only room on the door for one. That's basically what this is. She's like Rose on Titanic. There's only room on the door for. She decides that there's only room for her to prevent everyone from dying. John Blackthorn is trying to push something against the door, and he's like, help me, help me do that. And nobody will help him. And it's like, it's very frustrating because she decided she had to die, and she died. So I am looking forward to a hopefully, blood-soaked, battlefield, epic finale where everything hits the fan. And I am very excited to see the denouement of this story and what the outcome for Japanese culture is, depending on who wins this struggle and all of that. I mean, I feel like Toranaga is the odds-on favorite here, but we'll see. I truly can't predict where this story is going to end. So I'm pretty excited, and I'm enjoying the hell out of this show. I think so far this is the best show of the year. Pretty much, and we'll see how things go as the year wears on. But it is handcrafted. It is historically magnificent. It's just beautiful. And by the way, some of the wackos out there are upset. So they're upset that there isn't enough representation in the show. And it's like, well, there is representation. There are Spanish, Portuguese, and Japanese people. Those are the three parties which are at issue in this time and place. And if that bothers you, too bad. Like, go away. It's none of your business. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre to me. It's like, well, go tell your story that involves a different set of cultures. You're more than free to do that. Hold on.
The NPCs. We want a more diverse representation on television. We don't want to see America. We want to see Asia. Television network proceeds to give a show set entirely in Japan, almost entirely in Japanese, engrossed in Japanese culture. No, that's not what I want.
Yeah, the diversity and representation crowd. I mean, this proves that that's all such a lie because that's not what they want, because that's what this show is. That this show is about other cultures that are typically not highlighted in Western storytelling as often, just because of, just the reality of it. Also, I'm sure Western history is not as often highlighted in Japanese literature and so forth, which is as it is. But the point is that this is actual diversity because it is about cultures that were very different than each other from a historical perspective, encountering each other and negotiating their differences, their prejudices, their bigotry and preconceived notions of each other. It should be a diversity, equity, and inclusion wet dream, really, but it's not, because what it isn't is pushing their whatever bizarre propaganda that they want. So, but what I would say is I don't give a shit about any of that, because all I care about is, good storytelling and historical accuracy, which is what the show delivers. So, speaking of NPCs, so on my Twitter post for this show, the tweet that I put, I know it's not a tweet anymore, the post that I used to introduce the live stream was, if Shogun were produced by Netflix, Japanese, English, Dutch, and Portuguese cultures would have been misrepresented in service of DEI historical whitewashing. Fortunately, FX has the best show of 2024 to date, episodes 8 to 9 live review. And I had one NPC replied, bro, you're like 18 years old. What the fuck do you know about DEI? And so I think that Redoubt Productions caught a stray. I think you caught a stray, Redoubt. Because they can't possibly think that I'm 18. I think they think you're muted.
Oh no, I know I'm muted. I'm just looking over here. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about history or anything. Yeah. I don't understand.
Bro, you're 18. I love how it's so funny.
Bro, you're 18. I'm thinking, oh, I'm not in that category.
What do you know about DEI? It's like there's so much irrelevancy to unpack in that statement. First of all, why do you assume that someone who's 18 years old wouldn't know something about something? Second of all, you assume that I want to know anything about DEI. I hate that I know anything about DEI. The last thing on earth that I want to know anything about is that whacked out ideology. So that's so funny that they're like, what do you know about it? Oh God, I wish I knew nothing about it, sir. That's what I wish. so it's just,
I wish I could spend my time, nourishing my brain and researching valuable information. But instead, you shove all of your DEI content. You have to ingrain it into every single academic resource, and I have to suffer.
Oh yeah. This guy says he's at nerd leftist, and his
I'm pretty confident
his bio is Californian Socialist Politico. Oh God,
I'm pretty confident that's just a spam account. I don't even think that's a real person.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm just exploring the species here. But anyway, so Californian self-described Californian Socialist Politico says, "What would I know about DEI?" And it's like, what I would know about DEI is it's a fraudulent bullshit ideology that doesn't care at all about any of the things it claims to. So that's what I would know about it. But in any case,
and here's what I'll also say as we wind down for the evening. I want to mention, this is coming from FX, a Disney-owned property. I will give my money if they do something good. This is something good. Fair play.
This is something good.
Here's my $10 subscription to watch this. Make more of this.
And, shows like this also, I think, demonstrate that, DEI, in other words, undertaking to deliberately change things in story and censor and sensitivity read and alter art in service of an ideology is a mistake. It's a bad way to get at things, because you don't have to do that to have diversity in anything. All you have to do is tell an honest and authentic story. Any story is possible. Any story is possible featuring any culture in the world. If you put the story as the primal, as having primacy. And this show demonstrates it it gives us a window into a beautiful, sort of forgotten culture from our perspective in the West. And I love it. So it's just a wrong-headed approach. It's a top-down approach, which is, I would expect nothing less. Neutron Pack from a self-described Californian socialist. Self-described Californian socialist. You're welcome to it, sir. You're welcome to it. Enjoy the disintegration of society around you. Neutron Pack says it would be so much better that the assassins are from Toranaga than from Ishido. That would be interesting. Toranaga has plans within plans, so, and also Neutron Pack says because it would show that Toranaga is a master of deception. The show does a pretty good job of establishing that. Like, I really have enjoyed Hiroyuki Sanada's performance of this character. It's been awesome. I've really enjoyed Mariko, played by let me find the actor. Oh my god, this cast list is ridiculous. Control F. Mariko. There she is. Anna Sawai. I've really loved Yabushige. Who's the actor who played Yabushige? That would be... I can't even pronounce that one. Last name, Asano. It's but really magnificent performances in this. Cosmo Jarvis, John Blackthorne, exceptional. So I'm just having a ball with this show. Neutron Pack says, maybe I'm overthinking this, but make Toranaga still doing nothing. All he did was sending Mariko to Osaka. Maybe I'm overthinking this, but this means, I think what you're saying, this means Toranaga was still doing nothing because all he was doing was sending Mariko to Osaka. Well, what he was doing, however, now Toranaga is a master of waiting. I think what he's doing is he was using a kind of point of order. He's kind of defeating bureaucracy by simply forcing them to admit. You know what it's like? It's kind of like if you watch, any of these Senate hearings where one side interviews the secretaries or whatever of the opposing side, and they're never going to get a straight answer. All they're ever going to get is a bunch of filler. But that in and of itself reveals that they're hiding something because they're unwilling to say yes or no. So it's like, oh, it's a simple yes or no, but they'll say, our position is the blah, 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 the blah, 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 and we value and put as first priority blah, 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 and we are doing blah, blah, blah. It's like, but you didn't answer yes or no. So it's like, no, it doesn't get an official answer. It doesn't get the truth, but it does reveal their hand, which is that they're lying or they're hiding something or that they don't want to answer that question. And so what I think Toranaga was doing was everybody knows that they're prisoners in that castle, but everyone's playing along. And so he essentially engineered a situation that would call Ishido's bluff. And I think that's pretty brilliant. And I think that's smarter than, Toranaga does not have the numbers. He doesn't have the numbers to take Osaka by force. And he kind of knows that. So he's using...
He didn't have the numbers at the start of the show. Then he really didn't have the numbers after the earthquake.
Yeah. Neutron Pack says, my point is that a master of deception should not rely on others' actions for his plan to come true. Well, let me think about that for a second, Neutron Pack. You're saying you don't think any master of deception should rely on others for his plan to come true. I don't think there's any other way to do it. I think that I was reading on Comic Book Girl 19 recommended the book, The 48 Laws of Power. And so I was reading it. And it's really just it's a distilled Cliff Notes version of all the great thinkers like Sun Tzu and Clausewitz and all the great Machiavelli, all the great thinkers on like power, its application and all that. And so it's, and as she puts it, it is a dark tome, and that's for a reason. But it is fascinating because it explores a lot of those very ideas. And, you've heard the expression, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. That's not just a cute expression. That's literally tactical advice because, and this is coming from, I believe, Sun Tzu, what that was from. And why is that in The Art of War? And it's because, as that book was explaining, for Chinese emperors, most of them were being offed by their own friends. Like their own most loyal subjects were usually the ones that turned on them. And so it actually made more sense to keep an enemy close because a grateful enemy was predictable. You knew that they would stick a knife in your back, but the fact that you had sort of given them grace and struck a deal with them made them somewhat more trustworthy because, yeah, they may still want to knife you, but at least you know that, and at least they need you. As opposed to a friend who can lure you into a false sense of security. So my point is, the entire game of power, no matter what society you live in, nobody can do it alone. I don't think anybody can do truly anything alone. Like, you have to have people you trust. And my reading of the show is that Toranaga trusts Mariko above anyone else. There's literally no one else he trusts. Or if he does trust someone as much as her, he can't risk letting them in because, as Benjamin Franklin put it, if 3 men may keep a secret if 2 are dead. And I think Toranaga is applying that principle of, I can trust like one person, but nobody else. And it's got to be the one person I know would never fail me. I think that's kind of the beauty of the whole Game of Thrones concept, is that it's not really possible, no matter how good you are as a planner, as a court plotter, to actually win the Game of Thrones without at least one person that you can trust. And of course, the game there is, can you predict who will betray you and who won't? I think that's why some of the early seasons of Game of Thrones are so brilliant, because characters like Littlefinger and the Spider, they have to figure out who they can trust, or at least who they can predict their actions and what they'll do, if not trust. And you've got all those things going on. What I think really fails in the final seasons of Game of Thrones is they abandon all that, because suddenly Daenerys is trusting people she has no reason to trust, that have no track record of success. I mean, I think the one time I heard someone say that Tyrion had never advised someone correctly in most of the show, I was like, oh shit. Like almost all of his advice is a disaster. And it's like, so why is Daenerys trusting him? It's like, I think that's what kind of killed the show. So I guess I just disagree, because I think the game is not never trust anyone. It's a gamble, man. You got to place your bets. And I think that's the danger of all of, that's what kind of makes the great game, as it were, so intriguing, is because there's no sure thing. I think that's what I'm saying. I think there's no such thing as a sure thing in that. Stormcrow says, Captain Garrett, you saw emotional storytelling come from FX. Think you can do better this Friday? Well, if you said. I'm not trying to do better. I'm just, that would be this Friday, Fallout Dead Man's Cache. And that is the second episode of my new live stream, which is going to be, it's a role-playing game taking place in the Fallout universe. So yes, be there Friday, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 p.m.
Fallout
Eastern.
Show, the true Fallout show.
Yeah, Stormcrow, yes, I appreciate the vote of confidence. Obviously, I don't know that a tabletop game can compete with Amazon, but I will say this, the story is going to be every bit as epic as a TV show. And that also depends upon you, my dear players, as well. So join us. And yeah, it's Dead Man's Cache is about 5 self-serving sellswords in the wasteland who have been dispatched to the western wastes to uncover the rumored Dead Man's Cache, a limitless fortune hidden by the Enclave, who have vanished. If you know Fallout lore, you'll know who the Enclave is. And the rumor is that all who have ever tried to find this treasure have died in its pursuit. But it may just be the only way for our players to live a life of freedom, and incidentally, save the Commonwealth from Khazar's Legion. So, as you can tell, it's already pretty packed as far as storytelling goes. And you said, holy crap, you even know... I don't know, no, Stonecrow. I don't personally know Comic Book Girl 19. Maybe that's not what you meant. I know of her, I follow her channel, is what I meant. She got me into Dune, he says. Speaking of the Fallout show, we've had, I'm going to be talking more about this because my last Captain's Cast, I had only seen up to episode 9, and I had not finished it. And now that I've finished it, I have more fulsome thoughts on it. And I think I scored it about a 5 out of 10. on my last stream, and I might be revising that score down. I might be revising it down. We'll see. I'm thinking
The most the most divisive show I've heard about so far this year. Some people say they enjoy it. Other people want to burn it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of critical things about Fallout that I seem to hear a lot of people missing, and what I don't think people notice about the show. And Kurtzman Trek does this very well with Star Trek, by the way, which is the lore. And I'm not accusing Fallout of being that bad. I'm just saying it's a similar situation. The lore of the game, that is things like Pip-Boys, stim packs, the Robco Industries, the computers, the vaults, all of that stuff is very meticulously, lovingly recreated in the Fallout show. And I can understand loving that because I did love that. I did enjoy that. However, if you just separate for a minute that it's part of the Fallout universe and just forget that it's part of a video game and just think of it as a post-apocalyptic story that you just stumbled across without knowing anything about it, would you think this is a good post-apocalyptic world that has anything meaningful or philosophical or interesting to say? A la 28 Days Later, a la The Book of Eli, a la The Road, a la Mad Max, The Road Warrior. Would it compare with any of those? I submit to you that it does not. In fact, I submit to you it's not even close. I think it has an almost bizarrely wacky take on a post-apocalyptic world that isn't even consistent within the show. So that's the first thing I think people are missing about it. Second thing I think people are missing about it is the plot is a complete mess. And this puzzles me because a lot of people I respect are kind of saying, oh, it was fun. Like the Critical Drinker basically thought it was pretty good. I'm like, dude, it's full of people just randomly running into each other because the plot needs them to. And he usually hates that. So, but I am happy though. The long man, Mahler, reviewed it on the real BBC, and he's only seen the first episode, tore it to shreds. Tore it to shreds. And I was like, thank you. The other thing I'm hearing is that people love Lucy. That's it. That's the other thing people are missing. Everyone is saying that Lucy is a great character. And I'm like, I like her. I like the actress. And her character had a lot of fun things about her. But she is a complete tool. She's a complete idiot. And I don't mean that you can't have a fool triumphant character that's likable. I'm saying she's not a fool triumphant. If she were a fool triumphant, that would be fine. But she's not. She is a moron who gets away with it for no reason. And I don't think she grows much as the story goes on. Like she's kind of useless even in the final episode. And that really bothered me. So I don't see that. Walton Goggins, on the other hand, totally crushed it. Absolute boss. So
all I hear, the only thing that everybody universally likes from him is the Ghoul, and then everybody else.
He's amazing.
And then everybody has conflicting opinions over the rest of the show.
Yeah, they did butcher the timeline in the video games, and I've heard a lot of people
have heard about this.
I've heard people saying that they're coming after the New Vegas lore. Because in Fallout New Vegas, that's a very beloved game. It was not made by Bethesda. It was made by Obsidian. And that was interesting because that is a factor I had not considered because they hint that the next season is going to be New Vegas. And what's interesting is the events they depict in the show directly contradict New Vegas. And so the scuttlebutt is that Bethesda kind of hates Obsidian. And they hate New Vegas, and they don't like, it's just the rumor, that they look down their nose on the New Vegas fandom because it's not the Fallout they wanted to make. By the way, if you've ever played New Vegas, there is it's much more hardcore. Like the New Vegas post-apocalyptic world, that is a great post-apocalyptic world. Like there is slavery, there's like sex slavery referred to in it. It's gritty. People use the F word. It's violent and nasty. It's actually like the Wasteland is supposed to be in New Vegas, in my opinion. That's interesting to me because the show doesn't very well reflect that, and it could be a sign that some of these fans are right, that they're trying to piss on deliberately New Vegas. I don't know. I'm just saying.
I look, I've not really been into the Fallout world. I don't want to act like I know much about it. The little I've heard over the years of the internet is that, yeah, fans have upset at Bethesda because it always seemed Bethesda was spiteful over the fans longing for New Vegas. And it's like, well, here's Fallout 4. We liked that, but we really like New Vegas. Well, here's Fallout 76. Ah,
76 is an abortion. I hate Fallout 76 with a passion. And I will tell you, the Fallout show is more like the depiction of the wasteland in Fallout, the show, is closest, in my view, to 76. It's closest to that because you literally are walking through lush, verdant, living forests. And I'm like, that's not the wasteland. But Neutron Pack says, and yes, we are swerving into Fallout talk because I feel like it. Neutron Pack says, I like the quote, everyone tries to save the world. They just can't agree on how. I like that too. I like it too. I don't like the character that delivers the line. I don't like the circumstances in which that line is delivered. And I don't like the implication of moral relativism either. And that's more of a general thing. I'm just bored of that. I'm just sort of bored of constantly, but it's a good line. I'm not against it or anything. I have a lot of other thoughts about Fallout that I'll get into on the Captain's Cast live this Sunday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you like and subscribe, turn on notification bells, because we've got this Friday, we've got a Fallout RPG show, and this Sunday, we've got the Captain's Cast, and there will be more Fallout talk, more Shogun talk, and there's going to be some Godzilla -1 talk again soon. We're going to do the Acolyte, too. We're going to watch the glue-eating Acolyte.
Oh, God.
I'm going to focus as much as I can on things I like on this channel. I really am. But I will take time. I will make a special date on my calendar for what I can say. I think the Acolyte's going to be the worst one of these. I really do. I think it's going to be the worst thing we've seen yet. So we'll see. Yeah, I am fascinated by the Fallout debate, not because I think there's good points on both sides. I really do. People who like it, I understand why they like it. People who hate it, I understand why they hate it.
Sounds like you have different Fallout factions like competing with each other. Because if you have
games
from different producers, you have different interpretations of the show. So yeah, it's gonna make sense that the fan base will be divided.
But what I don't, the only thing that bugs me, okay, the only thing that bugs me is when I feel like people are overlooking an obvious flaw, and that's what bugs me. And so like the talk around the Lucy character bugs the shit out of me, because I don't say this because I wanted to dislike her. I really wanted to listen. Her character had a really brilliant setup. Her character had a really brilliant setup and an arc that should have been magnificent. I really do think that, because she's a fish out of water. She had all these naive beliefs about things. She faces that. There is one episode of the show, I think it's episode 5, where the ghoul puts her through the ringer, and that to me is the best episode of the show. It's the closest to greatness that the show ever gets, and it's just him and her in the desert, chewing over the morals of the wasteland. It's fairly brilliant. It's fairly magnificent. The problem is she interrupts that brilliant arc that she's building for herself by doing things that are inexplicably stupid in like the very next scene, getting away with things that clearly was just pure plot armor, and it undermines her character. It undermines her character because now I feel like she didn't earn it, and that bugs the shit out of me because I really wanted to like her, and I do mostly like her character, but yeah. Maybe the next season will be better. We'll get into it. But Fullman Blue says, the critical drinker broke shill, LOL. Yeah, I don't... well, I'm not going to go that far. Critical drinker... I don't know, whatever. Everyone says it's an echo chamber in the Fellowship. Everyone says it's an echo chamber on this side of the internet. It's clearly not, because people disagree all the time. Hell, the whole binge versus weekly thing is flaring up again. So there you go. Well, Redoubt, I might stay on and chew the fat about Fallout for a couple more minutes, but I don't want to keep you. If you want to jump off, or if you want to hang out for a little bit longer.
Well, I am going to have to head off. I am starting to fade. Work will do that to you. And also,
Yeah,
I've
it's
been
still early in the evening for me. I'm on the west.
yeah,
Coast,
you're
so.
good. You got ours go, but yeah, it's 8:30. In any moment now, the heavens are supposed to open up upon us, and that ain't gonna be fun.
Judgment Day.
Yeah, well, every day's Judgment Day here in Western Pennsylvania. The weather's Mother Nature's just like F you.
Wrangler says, hail, listing from the road. Hail, Wrangler. Yeah, and if you're liking the stream, throw a comment on there. If you're watching it on the restream, in addition to a like, if you feel like supporting the channel, throw a comment on there. Pop over to the X channel. I have it in the description. We are at the SNS channel. That's at the SN as in November S channel.
Twitter,
Throw a heart on the stream and maybe put a comment in there, because so far I only have a comment from the Californian Socialist Politico, and that's fine. But I'd like to, balance it out. Anyhow, if you're watching, I appreciate it. It's great having you here. And Wrangler with a $4.20 super chat. Why, thank you, Wrangler. Very kind, sir. Very kind. And as is his custom, he says, nada.
Nothing.
$4.20. Predictable. As he is
not allude to anything.
Even keel. No, it seems like a perfectly round number to me.
I agree. I don't see anything wrong with that.
All right, well, thanks for joining me, Redoubt Productions. I'll let you go off to bed. I'm going to wrap it up soon.
Yep. Just a heads up, guys. If you've ever tuned into my content, I do historical videos. I am deep into nonfiction storytelling, but I love telling stories regardless, even though these are stories that really did happen, and I have the facts to prove occurred on these premises, and I go out and document those premises. That was a weird way of showing my channel. Anyways, there is a big video coming out this Saturday. I've been working on it for the past month when time allows, and it's the start of a trilogy of videos. That trilogy won't be released consecutively. It'll be released in the coming weeks as time allows. So if you want to see this new big video I am working on, be sure to consider subscribing to Redoubt Productions. I'll see you guys over there. I'll probably see many of you in the chat this Sunday for another Captain stream. I'm looking forward to Swords of Starships podcasts. I tune in as much as I can. I work weekends, so that's why I don't appear to like midway in the chat.
Not at all, Redoubt. Any time with Redoubt Productions is time well spent. So we'll take it where we can get it.
We have one more episode, one more Shogun, and then that's it. And then I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of the year.
Yeah, we might cover House of the Dragon together.
I think we're going to have to. There ain't
and
really
I might
else.
We
much else to watch.
Might even expand the panel. We'll see how that goes. I'm excited for House of the Dragon.
Well, have a good evening.
You too, Redoubt.
Don't cause a real world fallout. Don't cause a real world fallout while you.
No, we stand athwart such an event. We advocate for human flourishing on this channel, and always will do. Always will do. All right, we'll see you, Redoubt. Have a good one. And there he goes. A scholar, a historian, a student of American history. Check out his channel, Redoubt Productions. He does historical breakdowns of like Civil War battles, all kinds of cool stuff. And he actually goes out to the battlefields and checks that stuff out. So he's awesome. Stormcrow in the chat saying, I want to be there for House of the Dragon. All right, Stormcrow. Well, let's just keep that in the hopper. I'll let any followers of the channel, we are on Discord. And if you want to join us on Discord, the link is, I believe, yes, it should be in the description. And you can join us. And if you're interested, if you feel like you've got like the chops to talk House of the Dragon, reach out to me and we'll see. We'll see what happens. I haven't, obviously it's going to be a while before it comes out, but when it comes out, we'll put something together. But yeah, so we're probably going to wrap it up soon. We're in overtime now because I just feel like talking about Fallout a little bit because we were talking about it on Discord and there's so many interesting thoughts about this. I have, I think, so on Discord, Dow was talking to me, but I think that is different name in the chat. That might be, I forget who that is, but what were we talking about? Yeah, we were talking about like the Book of Eli, for example. Like this is the thing I think people really miss about the Fallout show. Okay, I think they get really excited by all of the bells and whistles. It's okay. Yeah, it's you, Neutron Pack. Cool, thanks. Yeah, so you were bringing up the point that what was your point? They had a great payoff at the end. They did have some good payoffs. They had some nonsensical things in the plot at the end of the show. I'm not going to spoil anything on this stream, but I'll just say that like the way they ended things, there were some things that worked well, and there were some things that were like, what? There were things about the Vault Tech mystery that I really loved, but in the pre-war story, and then there were things about it that I found maddening and rushed and kind of like kind of a dumbing down of what the video games established. I hear this meme that, or this argument, let's say, that there's sort of two factions, if you will. There's people who love the video games who are tending to not like the show, and then there's people who are normies who are loving the show. I don't think that's the fault line. I don't think that's the actual fault line, because I hear people who like Fallout at least liking, if not loving, the show. So I honestly think the fault line for me is, do you see what's not there, or do you not? Or do you? Do you see what's not there, or do you not? Which is a clunky way to word it. But my point is that when I was watching the show, right, I was very distracted by the plot problems and the conveniences, the contrivances. I really dislike how they do the action in the show. They use just like Rebel Moon, they use slow motion to hide nonsensical situations that don't actually make a lot of sense. You know, like Mahler pointed out as well. It's like he pointed out that like the scene where they're all getting attacked in the vault, it's like, why would they wait until they're sitting there having dinner and then start massacring everyone? Why wouldn't they just massacre everyone immediately? Like, wouldn't the tactical choice be to just go in guns blazing? And, you know, also, how are they still surviving this? Like, they've been caught totally by surprise. Anyway. Just stuff. I think there's ways you could get at it that would have looked less clumsy, but it seems to me that Jonathan Nolan and the rest of the showrunners are more interested in the satirical juxtaposition of like the Great American Songbook music, sort of with all the, oh, look at the insanity of it all, look at the wanton destruction of it all, and we're playing it with this happy clappy 1950s music, and it's like, I knew they were going to do this. I knew they were going to do this. That is what Bethesda is most obsessed with in the Fallout universe, the wackiness factor. And that is what Hollywood people are most obsessed with in anything. They like anything that mocks, especially like mid-20th century American patriotism. They hate that. They think it's a big dumb joke, and they love anything that makes fun of it. And I'm not saying I'm against that in fiction. I'm just saying to them, it's like it's the lowest hanging fruit. And so it's no surprise to me that they kind of miss the forest for the trees in this show. It's like they miss the fact that Fallout is actually a very dark world. I'm talking in the video games here. It's a dark world. It's a fallen world. It is not meant to be a joke. It's meant to be taken seriously. Like when I'm playing the games, it feels serious to me. I feel like when raiders are attacking settlements, that is, they are pillaging, you know, they are taking prisoners, they're taking slaves, all kinds of unsavory things, not to be mentioned in the polite company we have here. And, you know, I think that when you're hearing the fun music from the pre-war era on your Pip-Boy, I think that highlights how fallen and destroyed the world is, and how sad it is that this is the way the world looks. And honestly, Fallout is one of those games that sometimes I can't play for that long because I start to get kind of depressed, and I'm like, oh my god, it's such a dark, dismal world. Fallout 4 is the only one that I could sort of play for an extended period because the whole, and I know some people hate this, but I love it. The settlement building gave me this feeling of like, oh, I'm rebuilding the wasteland. It gave it kind of this ray of hope, which like fueled me then when I would go and fight a bunch of cannibalistic super mutants and stuff like that. So I'm not saying you can't have levity, but there's a lot of bullshit MCU humor in this show. Oh, for God, take the Jello cake back. No, you say run for your life. It's ridiculous. And then there's a lot of scenes like that. I'm trying to remember. There was one scene there's a Brotherhood of Steel character that follows Maximus around. He's the main Brotherhood character, which I did not like him at all. The guy who follows him around is clearly meant to be the incompetent boob joke. He's meant to be the big joke of the show. And he often will say lines that are kind of dumb. There's a lot of MCU kind of humor in it that bothers me. And when I say that, I don't mean that I'm against levity or humor in a story or satire. I'm saying I don't like it when it's meta humor that is undermining us taking the world seriously. That's what bothers me. And so I don't think this world is taken very seriously in the show. And because of that, I think it's actually a very hollow, uninteresting, very uninspired post-apocalyptic world. I feel it has very little to say about a post-apocalyptic world beyond the most obvious thing, which is, oh my God, look at all the violence and carnage. Look at how awful people are and how cheap life is. Okay, yeah, well, that's the most obvious conclusion you can draw about any post-apocalyptic story. In order for it to be meaningful and have something new to say, I think it has to present a world that can stand on its own apart from the games. I'm not saying disregard the game lore. I'm saying you got to get at something real. And interestingly enough, I think the pre-apocalypse story with Howard Cooper, aka the Ghoul, that's actually pretty interesting and presents a really interesting portrayal of American culture in the pre-war era that I think was very effective in a way that the post-apocalyptic future, as it's portrayed, was not. And I think people are missing that. And they're missing it for the same reason that when I first watched Star Trek Discovery, I missed how not Star Trek it was. I missed how not Star Trek it was because they would reference Captain Archer being the first Starfleet captain to arrive on the Klingon homeworld. They would reference Tribbles. They would reference, the Kobayashi Maru or something. And it would make me think, oh, this is Star Trek. This is Star Trek. But then when I really thought about it, I'm like, no, it's not, because it's just a dumb action. It's a really dumb melodrama with frantic action scenes in it. And the tech talk and the science in it, it's not there to explore human philosophy. It's not there to explore the human soul or to ask questions about anything. It's either there to download the message or it's there to just get the plot moving, and it's nonsense. I'm not saying Fallout is quite that bad, but I am saying that the beautiful presentation of the vaults and the Pip-Boys and all that cool stuff, the Nuka-Cola machines, the Red Rocket truck stop, all that stuff is distracting people from seeing that the show actually has nothing to say about a post-apocalyptic world, which, in my view, is a travesty, because that's all the video games have something to say about. That's all the video games are about. That's my thought. That is my thought. Neutron Pack says, I did overlook a lot of things and just enjoy the good moments. Actually, Neutron, I'm pretty much with you. I'm saying it got me too, because the first couple episodes, I was a bit distracted by that. And then as it went on, and you know what it was? It was episode 5. Because when you get to episode, I think it's 5, where the Ghoul is leading Lucy across the desert and he won't give her water. That episode is brilliant. That is a brilliant episode, and I really enjoyed it. Also, Maximus is almost not in that episode at all, which is probably part of why it's so brilliant. But I will say that was the episode that clued me in that none of the other episodes had said anything interesting about the apocalypse until that episode. That was the only one where it was like, oh, okay, this is awesome. We're digging into this now. Because like that scene where she drinks radioactive water and he laughs at her, and then she's so fed up with him that she's like, what are you? And he just says, honey, I'm you. Just give it a little time. Like, that's brilliant. That's great stuff. That's pretty much the last of it that you get, because the rest of it is back to our regularly scheduled, oh, look, it's a Pip-Boy. Oh, look, it's the dog. You remember the dog. So that's what clued me in. I'm like, see, this show's not actually digging for anything meaningful. What it is it's vignettes. There are vignettes in the show that are really good. There are like I really love the scene where the ghoul is passed out in the desert and she has just survived almost having her organs harvested, and she beat these chem addicts, and she comes outside and she has him dead to rights for a change. And instead of letting him die, she gives him the medicine he needs after that whole prolonged thing of him teaching her, what a waste morals are in the wasteland. And she says, the golden rule, asshole, and then she walks away. I thought that was pretty good. Like, it was a nice resolution to that story arc. That's a vignette that was really fun and awesome. It's immediately interrupted with a bunch of other nonsense that gets in the way of that. And so that's my issue with the show. Yeah, so not throwing any shade, Neutron Pack says, true, only One Piece can do silly and make it make sense. I'm not saying that Fallout can't do silly. Actually, I'm trying to say, I think the best way I can put it is Fallout is not a silly satirical world. It is a dark, haunting, post-apocalyptic world with silly satirical things in it. And there is a difference. And what I think that the showrunners of this show misunderstand about the video games, and frankly, it's probably because I think Bethesda misunderstands this about the video games also, is that that's not what they are. They are not wacky, fun adventures in the wasteland. The first two games were deadly serious. Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 were deadly serious about this being a wasteland, a Mad Max hellscape. And then Fallout 3, I think, mostly continued that. Fallout New Vegas definitely continued that. Fallout 4 started to cheese things up a little with stuff like Nuka World and, stuff like that. But, Fallout 76 ruins it. But definitely starting with Fallout 3, there was a lot more in the game that was kind of memeing on the Pip-Boy and the pre-war paranoia and all of that stuff. And the way I see it is that what I think would be the proper reading of it is that we are looking at a world in Fallout, in the games, that is the result of the delusions that are represented in the pre-war propaganda. So, the happy, plucky Pip-Boy that's going to rebuild civilization, the constant bombardment of consumerism, about that even sort of glorifies the end of the world, such as you see a magazine where women are doing their hair in the shape of a mushroom cloud, how, they call the favorite cereal is sugar bombs, And so to me, what that's telegraphing is that the pre-war propaganda that a nuclear war is winnable and all this sort of thing, this is what led to the downfall. Or as the Brotherhood of Steel would argue, the irreverence for science, the fact that science was run amok, or as the Institute would argue that man did not invest in science enough. So different factions have different beliefs about what the nature of that delusion was, but whatever it was, somehow, some way, the way that society was organized, it was doomed. And that is what the satirical, silly side of it is representing. It feels silly because, we're hearing all these fun commercials about sugar bombs while we're looking at the wasteland that's left after everything was over. And I think that is meant to be sort of haunting and melancholy. And I think you can have fun with that in a show without undermining that seriousness. So I think the fault line on this show is people who are okay with it just being kind of wacky and fun are okay with the show. And fair enough. But I think people maybe more on my side of this who are like, I think you should take this world seriously. And honestly, I think you should give Book of Eli a run for its money. If I were the showrunner of this show, that would have been my goal. That would have been my goal. I'm like, I'm going to show viewers how the Fallout universe could give Book of Eli a run for its money. I mean, think about this, folks. It could give Mad Max a run for his money. Think about this. Like, we're talking about a future in which it isn't just a wasteland. It isn't just a fallen civilization. It isn't just radioactive fallout, which is all bad enough. We have mutated giant scorpions and deathclaws and creatures. We have the FEV virus, which has created super mutants. We have ghouls who turn feral. By the way, the show did have some really brilliant scenes with like ghouls that are turning feral. I actually did like that a lot. That was really good. Again, episode 5. It's almost as if all that was good in the show was like that one episode, but whatever. You have all of these fascinating. You also have technological nastiness. You have robots that roam the wasteland, gunning people down. You have secret societies like the Enclave. You have the Secret and Shadowy Institute that are designing, androids that can replace people. There are so many facets of this post-apocalyptic world to explore that if you took it deadly serious, it's the most fascinating and nightmarish apocalyptic world I think I've ever seen, with the exception of the anime Blue Gender. I think the anime Blue Gender is the only post-apocalyptic world I would rank as more interesting to me than the Fallout universe, because the blue infestation is just so fascinating in that show. So yeah, if you haven't seen Blue Gender, check it out. There's no apocalyptic world like it. It's kind of similar to Attack on Titan in many ways, but yeah, I think that is something the show's missed. So I think they could do silly if they had it in the proper context, is my point, Neutron Pack. But I take your point. One Piece does do silly well. And I have heard that like there's people who don't totally love the live action One Piece, but I understand that. I'm never going to argue with anyone that says One Piece was not faithful to the manga or the anime. I can't really argue with you on that, but I can say that the live action show seemed to have reverence for it. So I will say that in defense of the Fallout show on Amazon, it did not seem to hate the source material, and that is a big plus. Like, that's a very big plus. I mean, it did not hate the source material. I got the feeling that in many ways the Fallout show was a sincere love letter to the Fallout lore, if a misguided one, in my opinion. It was, in other words, I think that if I were to talk to Jonathan Nolan about this, it would be that he simply views the world differently than I do, is probably what it is. He just sees a different side of it. And by the way, that also kind of explains why the show is so divisive, because honestly, I don't really think there's any two Fallout video game fans alike, because, diehard New Vegas fans will often tell you they hate Fallout 4. Diehard Fallout 4 fans, like myself, may tell you that Fallout 3 is better than New Vegas. I don't know. There's a lot of, and then there's the old school Fallout fans that they prefer the first two video games, and they feel that everything after Fallout 2 doesn't count. So there's a lot of variety in the Fallout video game player base anyway. And I think we all see a different slice of this world. We all see, because I read on Reddit, there was a post by someone who said they had never played Fallout 3 without the radio turned on. Meaning the little Pip-Boy radio that plays music for you while you're exploring the wasteland, they had played the whole game with that. And one day they decided to turn that off and listen to the in-game musical score. And it changed the experience for them. Well, I'm the opposite. I never play with the radio on. I'm listening to the musical score of the game because I love the musical score. So right there is a fault line between two Fallout players, both played the same game, both had a totally different view of the experience of it. So I think that's a big reason why the Fallout show is so divisive, because we all see kind of what we want to see in the Fallout universe to an extent. So there you go. Okay, well, we did a double feature tonight. I had to get some Fallout off my chest, I just couldn't resist. But I think we're gonna close it out. So we have one more episode of Shogun on the horizon, coming right up. I think Redoubt and I are pretty much locked in for this time next Wednesday. That'll be 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Next Wednesday, we're going to review the season and series finale of Shogun. I'm excited. I'm hoping, can we just go for broke and have a big-ass samurai battle, please? I would like that. Best show of the year so far, folks. It's exquisite. Exquisite. Marvelous period piece. And this Sunday, the Captain's cast again, and we'll be talking more Fallout because I have finished the series as we just discussed, and I have even more thoughts than what I have shared with you here. So, and don't miss this Friday, Fallout Dead Man's Cash. We got everything. Everything is right here on the Swords and Starships channel. We are building new entertainment for you. So join us, like, subscribe, share it out there. And it's been great hanging with you. So goodbye, my dear sailors and star nauts. Have a great afternoon, a great evening, as the case may be. And this is Captain Garrett saying, as always, until next time, in the words of Q from Star Trek The Next Generation, I will see you out there.